Chapter 566. This surprise didn't last long. It almost disappeared in a flash. Young Master Sunday Jingwan said. Princess. Luo. Sun Yilin paused. Some words seemed to be on the tip of his tongue before he came up with such an address. Logically speaking, there was no problem with this address. However, it seemed to have a completely different meaning when it came from Sun Yilin's mouth. It was a little indifferent and seemed a little unwilling. Jingwan's eyes were still on his face. She was exceptionally magnanimous. She didn't have any emotional fluctuations in her heart, but she was more or less curious. She knew that his face was burned and disfigured because of the fire. However, when she met him when Duchess Ding passed away, his face was still covered with a white cloth. It didn't look as serious as it was now. Was it not the first time that Sun Yilin met people with such a face? He could completely ignore other people's gazes. However, when this person was Jingwan, he still felt embarrassed. He had an impulse to hide and hide. Although he tried his best to hide, there were some things that couldn't be hidden even if he wanted to. Especially in front of people he cared about, there was always a sense of uneasiness. It was a little awkward. Whether it was the former young Master Sun Yilin or the later Sun Yilin, whose temperament changed greatly and became unpredictable, it was not at all similar to the former young Master Sun Yilin or the later Sun Yilin, whose temperament changed greatly and became unpredictable. There was a reason why he didn't see Jingwan at the first time. However, when he saw her and mustered up the courage to face her, compared to Jingwan, Sun Yilin's eyes seemed a little unscrupulous. He moved his eyes inch by inch on Jingwan's body. It seemed that the former etiquette and the noble young master who was quite respectful to women was just an illusion. Now he was the real him. However, Jingwan didn't really care about these things. It was just that she didn't want to lose a piece of flesh, so she didn't retreat at all. However, Sun Yilin's thoughts. To her, Sun Yilin was actually just a passerby in her life. He really didn't hold much weight. If he wasn't Sun Yijia's closest brother, and if it wasn't for her husband, who was super jealous, constantly thinking about him, Jingwan was afraid that she would have already forgotten about this person. Jingwan thought that her marriage with Sun Yilin was ruined by someone. She didn't feel guilty because she knew that even if no one was involved between her and Sun Yilin, most of it would fail. Therefore, she didn't feel sorry for him. Except for those who had been in the limelight for a long time, being stared at like this more or less made people unhappy. Previously, she thought that Sun Yilin had already let go of her. She didn't feel anything from the beginning to the end. She was just happy that her husband wouldn't use this as an excuse to make a fuss. Now it seemed that it wasn't the case at all. This was definitely not narcissism, but Sun Yilin's behavior was too obvious. She couldn't even pretend that she didn't know. Jingwan actually didn't agree with this situation. After all, it was just a one-sided love. It wasn't mutual love. Jingwan found it hard to understand. Perhaps it had something to do with her personality. She couldn't fall in love with someone first. Moreover, they had only interacted with each other a few times. How did he fall in love with her so deeply? Jingwan felt that this was extremely inconceivable. In Jingwan's eyes, it was unreasonable for someone to resort to unscrupulous means because they couldn't get what they wanted. As for those who hurt others because of love and hate, it was even more despicable. After all, the other party didn't owe them anything. Of course, before the matter was clear, Jingwan wouldn't jump to conclusions. What Sun Yilin was doing now might not have anything to do with her. Jingwan thought that her sentiments weren't to the point where she would take everything on herself. Even if it was really related to her, she expressed that she wouldn't take the blame. If just breaking off the engagement could make him turn evil, then it would make people suspect that Sun Yilin's mind was actually only 3 years old. Or maybe he was seriously in the second stage of middle school. As long as he didn't get what he wanted, he would destroy the world. Sun Yilin's gaze finally fell on Jingwan's stomach. There was an unknown darkness in his eyes. Jingwan was unmoved just now. But now she couldn't help but move her body. Her hand was placed on her lower abdomen. Her defensive posture was too obvious. Sun Yilin saw this and calmly withdrew his gaze. He concealed his attitude. He didn't say much about Jingwan's movements. As for what he was thinking in his heart, no one knew. Are you okay? Perhaps because he had adjusted his state of mind, Sun Yilin was much gentler. His negative emotions seemed to have dissipated, but he still deliberately ignored the way he addressed her. Thank you for your concern, young Master Sunday. I'm fine. This wasn't a polite remark. Jingwan was really fine now. Sun Yilin sat down beside Jingwan. That's good. If you need anything, just let me know. Is that so? I thought that as a hostage, I should have the consciousness of a hostage. If the treatment was too good, it would give people the illusion that they were a VIP. If the situation became worse later, there might be a psychological gap. This wasn't good. Sun Yilin was silent for a moment. You're pregnant now. If you have any request, it's not too much. He paused. Even if it's not a special situation, you deserve the best at any time. Young Master Sun, you're from a famous family. I think you know the etiquette and rules better than anyone else. You've overstepped. Sun Yilin was silent. For a moment the corner of his mouth twitched. It was strange, evil, and gloomy. Rules? I followed the rules too much. That's why I was schemed against and robbed of my wife. Jingwan's heart jumped slightly. Did Sun Yilin know everything? That's impossible, right? What do you mean, young Master Sun? It was best to stop this topic. However, Jingwan needed to know more information now. The more she knew, the more advantageous it would be for her in the future. So it was best to follow his intentions and slowly fish for information. What do you mean? Sun Yilin once thought that Li Hongyuan didn't treat Jingwan well. A man like that, with a high status and no power on the surface, would do things his own way without any scruples. Compared to those with power, he was much more casual. Without power, he was pampered even more. If he didn't have power, the emperor would favor him even more. If he didn't have power, there would be no restrictions. A person like that would definitely be self-centered and wouldn't consider other people's feelings. Moreover, he was also a womanizer. Whoever became his wife was destined to be neglected and wronged. However, reality was different from what he thought. He didn't believe it and didn't want to believe it. He stubbornly thought that if it wasn't him, no one would be able to give her happiness. But the truth was, that's right. How could Li Hongyuan tell you what he did? Wouldn't that be exposing his despicable, shameless, and dirty side? Even a shameless person would still pay attention to his image sometimes. Young Master Sun, it's not gentlemanly to criticize our prince behind his back. Sun Yilin looked at Jingwan. His eyes never left her. He was somewhat unhappy that Jingwan was so protective of Li Hongyuan. However, from Jingwan's point of view he could understand. But when he thought that if Li Hongyuan hadn't interfered, Jingwan would be protecting him now, the gloominess in his heart became stronger. I used to be a gentleman, but what was the result? I regret it now. If I had been a villain, I believe the result would be completely different. It's enough to regret it for a lifetime. Jingwan frowned slightly. She felt that the current situation was a little bad. Sun Yilin reached out and seemed to want to smooth her eyebrows. Jingwan subconsciously avoided it. Sun Yilin was not angry. He put his hand down and put it on the back of Jingwan's hand. When Jingwan wanted to pull away, he increased his strength so that Jingwan could not succeed. This was the person he liked. Because of the etiquette, even when they were engaged, they did not touch each other's skin. Now it seemed that he got what he wanted, and there was a strange excitement. Jingwan did not pull him, but her face was completely cold. Let go. Jingwan. This address made Sun Yilin's unwillingness disappear. However, it was still not intimate enough, and he was not satisfied. I won't hurt you, and I don't want to hurt you. This is all I want now. So please don't refuse me, okay? I'm a married woman, and if I'm a lady, I shouldn't be violated by you. You're simply unreasonable. Sadness flashed in Sun Yilin's eyes, and his face became cold. Wan, it doesn't matter what you say now. I've already decided to be a villain. Now I'm the knife and you're the fish. Even if it's not for anything else, even if it's for the child in your belly, you shouldn't do anything to anger me, right? Jingwan did not resist, but her eyes became colder and colder. If her impression of Sun Yilin was good before, now it was completely negative. Sun Yilin knew that Jingwan would hate him, but he couldn't control himself because he knew that this might be his last chance. and he didn't want to give up. It doesn't matter if you hate me. We'll have a lot of time in the future, and I'll gradually change your opinion of me. In the future? You'll live in hell in the future. Jingwan sneered. Wanwan, do you think I can't win against him? Let's not talk about winning or losing for the time being. Wanwan, do you know what Li Hongyuan is doing now? You have a beauty in your arms, and you've probably forgotten her name. In this way, do you still think about him? Jingwan didn't believe a single word. She believed that even if those people had used some kind of method to put a curse on him, he wouldn't do anything to hurt her. Jingwan didn't even have that kind of confidence in herself. She had seen that man's ability and his tenacity. She believed that as long as it was something he wanted to do, there was nothing he couldn't do. This kind of mentality was simply to the point of blindness. Sun Yilan's heart was burning with jealousy. This was an emotion that he had never felt before. Why could a man like Li Hongyuan gain her trust so much? Insidious, cunning, treacherous, and arrogant. There was nothing praiseworthy about him. He even deceived everyone in the world, but took all the benefits. It seems that if I don't let you see it with your own eyes, you won't believe it. So let's wait and see. In fact, I don't want you to see that kind of scene. As a wife, no matter how much feelings you have for your husband, you won't feel good when you see him being intimate with another woman. The deeper the feelings, the greater the hurt. It's really not easy for the son of an aristocratic family to have such awareness. These words might be praise in normal times, but now it was more sarcastic. I just don't want to use this kind of method to test the depth of your feelings for him. If that's the case, you really don't need to test it. I can tell you now that I'm sincere to him, and I'll never change it until death. Sun Yilan suddenly increased the strength of his hand. Jingwan was in pain, but her face was expressionless, and she didn't show any weakness. Sun Yilan's expression became somewhat deranged. You should have been mine. If it wasn't for Li Hongyuan's interference, you and I should have lived together, and followed each other in life and death. Jingwan's expression was shocked. It wasn't Sun Yilan's words that made her like this, but his face. That pit, which originally looked like an ordinary scar, now seemed to be alive. Something was wriggling under the surface. Not only that, the scar was expanding at a speed visible to the naked eye. She even suspected that at some point, his entire face would become that terrifying appearance. Your face. Jingwan couldn't help but cry out. The deranged Sun Yilan seemed to be strangled by his neck. For a moment, he was speechless. Then, he seemed to come back to his senses and hurriedly reached out to cover his face. Don't look. His actions were really like those of a disfigured woman. As if the most embarrassing thing had been discovered, and he was panicking. Jingwan couldn't help but frown. Even a 3-year-old child could tell that this wasn't normal. Not to mention other things. Was Sun Yilan really disfigured by fire at the beginning? She didn't know if it was because of the change on his face, but Sun Yilan suddenly got up and rushed down from the carriage in a panic. That posture was so embarrassing. Jingwan's frown deepened. She now suspected that Sun Yilan was also controlled by the goo worm. Of course, even if that was the case, what he did was unforgivable. Jingwan sat in the carriage, lost in thought. Outside the carriage, there was a faint sound of little Blackie's voice. She seemed to be arguing with someone. She could basically guess the reason. After all, a stranger ran into her carriage. As someone by her side, how could she be indifferent? Jingwan didn't do anything. Little Blackie might be suffering some bad treatment now, but if she paid too much attention to it, it might make things worse for her. Her current treatment was because of Sun Yilan. Other people with unknown origins might not be willing to give her preferential treatment in their hearts. Therefore, the only one who suffered would be the people by her side. Little Blackie was the only one. Jingwan slowly closed her eyes, hiding all her thoughts. The curtain of the carriage moved again. Jingwan opened her eyes and saw Sun Yilan appear again. His face no longer had that strange change, but the scar on his face had increased by at least 1/10 compared to before. Digression. During the new year, plus a cousin's wedding these 2 days, there were things to be busy. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/155734323 HTML chapter error. Click here to report, no registration. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book, www.bicken.com mobile edition reading website, and bicken.com. Chapter 567. The curtain of the carriage moved again. Jingwon opened her eyes and saw that Sun Yilin had appeared again. His face no longer had that strange expression, but the scar on his face had increased by at least 10% compared to before. Sun Yilin, on the other hand, was very calm. It was as if the previous embarrassment had never happened. If it were not for the special situation, Jingwon would have praised his good composure. Maybe it's presumptuous, but I still want to ask. Shouldn't young Master Sun tell me something? Sun Yilin smiled. There was no gentleness like before. Instead, there was a strange sense of fear. There's nothing to say. Jingwon stared at him for a moment and closed her eyes. Her intention to refuse to communicate with him was obvious. Sun Yilin seemed to be unaware. He sat down, poured a glass of water, and took a sip. His action was as if he was tasting the best wine in the world, with some intoxication. During the whole process, his eyes were on Jingwon's face. So what he was tasting was not water or wine, but beauty. Won, no matter what kind of life you've been living in the past, whether it's bitter on the outside or sweet on the inside, I can guarantee that I'll do my best to give you the best of everything. There won't be anyone else by your side. I can even treat the child in your belly as my own. So, can you forget about the past? Sun Yilin said to himself wishfully. He did not get a response from Jingwon, but he was not angry. He continued to look forward to a beautiful future. From the picturesque scenery in Jiangnan to the vast snowfield in the north, from the treasures in the sea along the coast to the magnificent mountains and fields, everything was so beautiful. However, without a good mood, no matter how beautiful things were, they were equal to nothing. No matter how much he yearned for something, if the person who accompanied him was not the one who cared about it, he would become dim and lose interest. Jingwon finally could not listen to it anymore. She opened her eyes and said, "Young Master Sun, aren't you too self-righteous? Have you ever asked me if I was willing? It's okay. As long as you forget the past, you'll only see me in the future. At that time, you'll definitely be willing." Sun Yilin's voice was exceptionally gentle. He even reached out and gently stroked Jingwon's hair. Jingwon's pupils shrank. She didn't feel any warmth. Instead, she felt as if she was being stared at by a poisonous tongue. Her hair stood on end. She didn't know anything about goo worms, so she didn't know how scary they were. She didn't know if there was really a goo worm that could make people forget their past. If there was, then it was definitely something that Jingwon didn't want to see the most. Is Won afraid? Don't worry, it'll be fine. You won't feel any pain. It'll be very easy and simple. Jingwon pursed her lips. Actually, she still didn't understand. What was it that caused the former #1 young master in the capital to become like this? Could it be that it was only because he found out that her husband had disrupted their marriage? Was she really that important to him? They had only met a few times and didn't know each other well. She didn't think that she was that special. Why did he miss her so much? No matter how she looked at it, it was like a big joke. Jingwon really wanted to ask, "Do you really like me?" Or was it because of the unwillingness in his heart, coupled with the fact that someone else had done something to turn what was originally a normal relationship into a special one? Turning ordinary love into obsession? Or was it because of some other factors that caused him to turn into a demon? Jingwon didn't ask any of these questions. "Where are you taking me?" Jingwon asked. She originally thought that they were going to a place where her husband was, but now she wasn't so sure. Sun Yilin smiled. "Why Won, do you want to elope with me directly? I want to too, but it won't work. If we don't settle some things, even if we elope, we won't have a peaceful life. Although I don't want you to see anyone other than me, I don't want you to stay in one place forever. So I have to get rid of all the future troubles." After getting the answer she wanted, Jingwon closed her eyes again. Sun Yilin's current appearance was really ugly. It wasn't his appearance, but his attitude and his heart. If this continued, Jingwan was worried that she would vomit. Wanwan, you're actually very happy, right? To be able to see him again. I actually don't understand how someone like Li Hongyuan could gain your favor. Clearly, you are the one who can't tolerate men being half-hearted. How can you let bygones be bygones just because he changed his mind? He used to change people around him constantly, and it's highly likely that he will do so again in the future. Do you think that he will always stay by your side wholeheartedly? That's impossible. I'm different. Even now, I haven't had any physical contact with any woman. Besides, Wanwan, don't you think you're being unfair? Li Hongyuan has a lot of debts. I only had a small problem with my body, and it was set up by others. Our marriage is over just like that. Sun Yilin. Jingwan couldn't take it anymore. She opened her eyes and looked at him coldly. What I do now and what I do in the future has nothing to do with you. Also, you'd better be clear about one thing. Even if no one else interfered with our previous marriage, do you think it's okay? Even if you were set up by others, it's because the loophole in your body was too obvious. Others didn't have to do anything to make you suffer. What's wrong? Has your temperament changed, and even your mentality has decreased to that of a 3-year-old? You're acting like I'm ungrateful and heartless in order to climb up the social ladder. Sun Yilin, let me tell you, I don't owe you anything. Don't nag in my ear. Do you know that you're really annoying? A trace of hurt flashed across Sun Yilin's eyes. He didn't even notice it, but his expression was still calm. Wanwan, is that how you think of me? That's really sad. But it's okay. I know that pregnant people are a little temperamental and often can't control their emotions. If you're unhappy, you can vent it out. I'll forgive you. Jingwan actually regretted saying those words after she said them. She was afraid that she would offend Sun Yilin in a moment of carelessness. If that happened, she would be the one to suffer, especially the child in her belly. In the end, when she heard Sun Yilin's words, she really wanted to vomit. What kind of person was this? He was the real perverted lunatic, wasn't he? Jingwan suppressed the anger in her heart and really decided not to say another word. After that, Sun Yilin continued to whisper in Jingwan's ear. He didn't say anything in an orderly manner. He said whatever came to his mind and didn't mind that he was thirsty. For a full hour, Jingwan could be considered to have seen it thoroughly. It was also the first time that she realized that there were also times when a person who read too many books had a bad side. Young Master Sun, can you please leave? This princess wants to change clothes. This kind of thing was usually quite embarrassing. But now Jingwan didn't feel it at all. Sun Yilin still wanted to continue and prepared to leave with a little regret. But when he lifted the curtain of the carriage, he turned back and looked down at her condescendingly. Wanwan, I don't like how you call yourself, so I hope you'll pay attention next time. I can't bear to hurt you. But even a clay figurine has a temper. I may not be able to suppress it all the time. I won't do anything to you, but it doesn't mean that I'll be so tolerant to others. Sun Yilin, what do you think of your sister with what you're doing now? If you let her know, what will she think? Sun Yilin's expression didn't change. He was calm and unruffled. Wanwan, how many people do you think will know about this in the end? She will still be like how she was in the Luo family. I thought you would say that when we conquer the capital, you'll even give her a title of nobility. Jingwan said sarcastically. I'm not that ambitious. Qi Yuan may be declining day by day, but it's not that bad. Obviously, Sun Yilin was admitting that he had defected to the enemy country. Since that's the case, you should know that you may not succeed in this matter. What will you do when the time comes? Don't I still have you? You've done a lot for her. I believe that you won't vent your anger on her because of me. Yes, I won't. But she's in the Luo family and has to face the Luo family every day. When the time comes, will I be able to change her situation with just one sentence? Everyone has to rely on themselves to live their own lives. Sun Yilin got down from the carriage, and his voice was a little shaky. Jingwan secretly clenched her fists and took a deep breath to suppress her anger. Blackie quickly got into the carriage to serve her. Her eyes were full of worry. When she saw that Jingwan's clothes were neat and she was in good spirits, she heaved a sigh of relief. Your Highness, don't worry, I'm fine. Sun Yilin won't do anything to me. You should take good care of yourself. Blackie clenched her fists and her eyes were burning with anger. She looked like she wanted to chop Sun Yilin into pieces. Your Highness, what happened to him? How did he become like this? Blackie was angry, but she also could not believe it. There was a trace of pity in her voice. They were all familiar with Sun Yilin's good reputation. Who knows? Jingwan's voice was a little muffled. Subsequently, Blackie helped Jingwan to change her clothes. Fu Rong also came to help. However, she was coldly refused by Blackie. If she still had doubts at the beginning, how could she not know now? In Blackie's eyes, Fu Rong was an ungrateful ingrate. It was already her limit to not beat her. How dare she hang around in front of her, and Her Highness? She was really looking for death. Fu Rong, Blackie is enough. You don't have to come again. Jingwan said in a low voice. Fu Rong's eyes darkened. Your Highness, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid at any time. Then she squatted down and turned away. Her footsteps were still not light or heavy. What is it? Your Highness is not afraid. It's you who are despicable. Blackie said hatefully. Jingwan was thoughtful. Fu Rong seemed to be implying something. She didn't just come to comfort her. From that day on, Sun Yilin appeared from time to time. He didn't spend as much as the first day, and Jingwan could basically completely ignore him. Later on one day, it seemed that someone came, and the itinerary suddenly accelerated. Jingwan thought that Sun Yilin slowed down the itinerary, which made the people behind him dissatisfied. The itinerary was accelerated. Compared to before, Jingwan was indeed a little uncomfortable. However, it was not a big deal. Her appetite was a little weaker, her spirit was a little worse, and there were some faint soreness in her body. Blackie saw it in her eyes and was anxious in her heart. Sun Yilin's worries were also expressed. He even had a dispute with the other party's people. In the end, the itinerary slowed down a little. Therefore, Blackie's resentment against him weakened a little. Occasionally, she looked at Sun Yilin with a complicated expression. Jingwan smiled, with a little weakness. She was really a straightforward girl. Her mood could change so easily. After traveling like this for nearly 6 or 7 days, the carriage stopped again. Because the road before was still smooth, Jingwan slept in the carriage and was a little drowsy. Jingwan only thought that this time stop was similar to before. It was just a break in the middle, until Sun Yilin once again boarded the carriage. Wan, you will soon be able to see our Jin Qinwang. You say, if he knew that you have been eating and living with me all this time, and that I carried you to him, what do you think he would do? Jingwan was completely awake. Her heart was a little excited. She opened her eyes. If that's really the case, then congratulations. You are one step closer to the road to the underworld. Wan, by saying this, do you think that he won't have any ill feelings towards you? Is Jin Qinwang's breadth of mind that broad? Jingwan mockingly tugged at the corner of her mouth. Not to mention that there was nothing between her and Sun Yilin. Even if there was, a certain someone's anger would only be vented on Sun Yilin and the people behind him. No matter how terrible things he did, he would never hurt a single strand of her hair. This kind of 100% trust seemed like it couldn't be torn apart. In Sun Yilin's eyes, it was especially dazzling. He felt particularly hateful and had the urge to destroy it. Why couldn't it belong to him? The hand that fell on Jingwan's head followed her hair and fell to her neck, slightly exerting force. Jingwan's expression became colder and colder. She looked at Sun Yilin without the slightest fear. She completely ignored the scar on his face that was once again squirming and expanding. Sun Yilin suddenly let go. He buried his head and took 2 deep breaths. When he raised his head again, the scar on his face had once again expanded and stopped squirming. Other than that, there was nothing else. Wan, I'm sorry. I didn't want to hurt you. I really didn't want to. Don't blame me, don't blame me. Jingwan didn't say a word. Sun Yilin withdrew from the carriage. Outside, there were noises again. Jingwan raised her head to look. The light from the skylight dimmed a lot. Presumably, it was already close to evening. She didn't know where it was outside and didn't know where her husband was. However, knowing that he was nearby, her heart settled down. At the same time, the longing that was suppressed in the bottom of her heart also broke out. So much so that the corners of Jingwan's eyes were a little wet. In the end, she didn't let those tears fall down. She reached out to wipe them away and laughed at herself. This person, when she had someone to rely on, she became delicate. The warmth and tenderness, it wasn't only aimed at men, it was actually easier for women to indulge in it. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/155733425. HTML chapter error. Click here to report. Registration is not required. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book: www.bicken.com. Bicken.com mobile edition reading website, and Bicken.com. Chapter 568. Jingwan could not determine their approximate location based on the environment alone. However, regardless of whether it was the weather or the overall journey, she could conclude that they were still in Qiyuan. Moreover, they were still far from southern Qi. This was not in line with her initial estimation. Therefore, she was more certain that those people were targeting Li Hongyuan. Jingwan originally thought that they would spend the night here. However, she did not expect that after a short rest, they would continue on their journey. However, they abandoned the carriage and seemed to want to ride horses or walk on foot. Jingwan's horsemanship had improved greatly. Even if the road was rugged, as long as the horse was not galloping, it would not be a problem. Therefore, she rejected Sun Yilin's offer to take her. However, she was about to be 5 months pregnant. Moreover, it was winter and her clothes were much thicker. Therefore, when she got on the horse, she frowned slightly. Blackie was carrying a large bundle that was almost half her height. She stood beside the horse with a worried expression and looked up. "Your Highness, do you want me to take you?" Jingwan shook her head. "No need. I'm fine." Jingwan touched her lower abdomen and said in her heart, "Baby, bear with it. When this matter is over, you should be able to settle down." Jingwan grabbed the reins with both hands and looked coldly. Naturally, she was thinking about more than this. She guessed that it was not only this matter that was happening, but also the capital. During this period of time, if there was no trouble in the capital, Jingwan would doubt their intelligence. In fact, in her opinion, these two matters were complementary. Blackie was worried about Jingwan. No matter what, she would not leave Jingwan's side. Relying on her good health and martial arts, she insisted on leading Jingwan's horse personally. Blackie encountered many difficulties along the way, but she solved most of them in a simple and violent way. She knew that these people would not do anything to the princess, so she did not show any mercy. Later on, when she was surrounded by several people, she showed that she did not care about her life. If they really wanted to do anything to her, she would definitely drag them down with her. In the end, these people could only use silent violence. At the same time, they also had to prevent her from kidnapping Jingwan. Obviously, in their opinion, Jingwan did not come out willingly. She would definitely try to escape if she had the chance. Now that the target was close at hand and the horse was there, they naturally could not let the master and servant be together. For a moment, they were in a deadlock. "Enough. Let's get on our way. If anything happens to you people, you can commit suicide to atonement." Perhaps they were indignant in their hearts, but Sun Yilin still had some prestige among these people. Therefore, Blackie led the horse in the middle. The others were either riding or walking around. In short, they did not want to let a fly fly in. Jingwan looked at them and did not comment. She did not take it seriously at all. They basically trotted along the way, but the more they went, the more they went. Even if there were torches all around, they could not tell the direction. In this way, for more than 2 hours they turned left and right on the road. They did not know where they went. If this continued, Jingwan really could not bear it. "Stop, don't go." As soon as the voice fell, Blackie immediately reined in the horse. It could be said that the order was strictly followed. However, how could the others be happy? For a time, all kinds of unpleasant words came one after another. Jingwan did not take it seriously at all. She held Blackie's hand and directly got off the horse. These people's opinions were never within the scope of her consideration. These days, she also saw clearly that although Sun Yilin was suppressing them on the surface, in fact, there were other reasons why these people did not dare to touch him. As for what it was obvious. She still had great value, and on her husband's side, it was obvious that those people did not succeed at all. Jingwan was not arrogant, but she was quite at ease that she wanted to rest. After that, Sister Hei deftly found a place to tidy up. She untied the big bundle behind her, but it turned out that it was full of thick and warm things. This work was spread out for Jingwan to use. Not only that, she also quickly entered the forest. Not long after, she picked up a lot of dead branches and withered grass and lit a fire. She also took some utensils without asking. First, she made some soup for Jingwan to drink to warm her stomach and body. It was enough to show that Blackie's survival ability in the wild was absolutely excellent. Even if it was the wilderness, because she was well taken care of. Jingwan quickly recovered and looked a little sleepy. During this period, Blackie had already used the existing things in the forest to build a simple hut for Jingwan. Jingwan sighed in her heart. Her own maid could be a wilderness survival expert. The others were not so lucky. They were a group of rough people, and their ability to take care of themselves was limited. It was good enough that they could eat plain water and sleep on the ground. Originally, they could have a good sleep in the latter half of the night. However, because of Jin Qian princess consort's interference, there was nothing left. Their resentment was naturally heavier. However, Blackie scowled and angrily stood guard outside like a cold-faced female yaksha. She looked like she would fight to the death with anyone who caught up. On the other side, in a valley, there was a simple farmhouse. There were about 3 rooms, but they were all brightly lit. Jin Qian Wang Li Hongyuan was in one of the rooms, sitting casually with his eyes closed. He looked cold and his whole person was cold to the bones. The 2 people next to him were like door gods. Their breathing was very slow. A man in black came in from outside. Master, Wang Fei has already reached the forest 10 li away. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/156707050. HTML chapter error. Click here to report. Exempt from registration. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book. www.bicken.com. Bikugo mobile reading website, bicken.com. Chapter 569. Li Honyuan opened his eyes. However, they were as dark as a pool, bottomless. There was no trace of the warmth that he should naturally show when he heard about Jingwan. If Jingwan suddenly stood in front of him, she might think that he had changed. The people around Li Hongyuan were in a state of extreme tension from morning to night. That kind of oppression seemed to be able to suffocate people at any time. Even if their master didn't say or do anything, just a glance from him would make you feel like you were stripped naked and placed in a world of ice and snow. That kind of feeling of being frozen from the inside out would make you lose all ability to think and move, and become a little lamb at the mercy of others. Before their master married Wang Fei, he was also very terrifying. He was ruthless and unpredictable, but at least he made people feel that he was still a human. But now he really didn't seem like a human, but a true heartless devil. Even if he was terrifying, he was still human. No matter how terrifying a person was, most of the time, he was normal and reasonable. They were shadow guards, men of sacrifice. Everything belonged to their master. When they faced their master, there was no fear. No matter what he did, in their eyes, they could accept it. It was a normal thing. But now it was completely different. They were on the verge of death all the time. It was not a clean death, but a death of torture and fear that made even their souls tremble. There was no time like this when they wished for Wang Fei to be here. However, they were also very worried. Was Wang Fei really suitable to see the current Wang Ye? Even if Wang Fei had an unparalleled position in Wang Ye's heart, even if the whole world added together couldn't compare to her, Wang Fei occupied all of Wang Ye's heart. But what if Wang Ye didn't have a heart? Did that mean that in Wang Ye's eyes, Wang Fei was the same as other people? Wang Fei and Wang Ye were deeply in love. Because nothing major happened, There was no situation where they would accompany each other in life and death. However, they were very clear that if there really was such a time, they would definitely be together until death. It could be seen that if Wang Ye broke off his feelings for Wang Fei, how big of a blow would it be to her? Wang Fei's current situation was special. Under such a big shock, it was possible that, however, they still had hope in their hearts. Even now, the princess consort was special in the prince's heart. His Highness was afflicted with the love-sealing goo, which sealed the master of another female goo that was paired with the love-sealing goo. Under normal circumstances, after being afflicted with such a goo, His Highness would only think of the other goo's master. He would be obedient to her and would be indifferent to everyone else. However, His Highness's current situation was that he treated everyone the same. There was no such special uniqueness. The love-sealing goo was really just a love-sealing goo. The owner of the female goo tried to get close to him, but she almost lost her life. If it wasn't for the fact that the female goo had absolute control over the male goo, if the male goo's owner had any thoughts of harming the female goo, it would immediately bite back. Because of the bite back, that woman escaped from the hands of the prince. However, they couldn't do anything to that woman. Not to mention that the male goo would control its master to protect the female goo, which was even more powerful than the love-sealing goo. It wasn't completely ineffective on its master. It would occasionally work. In addition, it was said that the woman had a type of substitute goo, which was the mother goo. The owner of the child goo would take the outside world's harm on her behalf. The child goo was in the princess consort's body. Although they were skeptical of this theory, after witnessing the strangeness of goo these days, they would rather believe it than not. Therefore, they were in a passive position now. However, they weren't completely passive. At least, they knew about the princess consort situation. They weren't as ignorant as some people thought. It was obvious that His Highness valued and was loyal to the princess consort. Even if he trusted Master Liaochen, it was impossible for him to not have any protection. However, these people were hidden in the dark. On one hand, they were protecting the princess consort, and on the other hand, they were monitoring to find the traitor. Therefore, it was a joke that the news of Jingwan waking up couldn't be spread. Perhaps they couldn't know where Li Hongyuan was, but they had special channels to pass on information. The development of the situation was just a matter of following the trend. What's the situation? His voice was cold, as if he was asking about something ordinary. The person who came and lowered his eyes and gave a simple account of what had happened. He didn't need to look to know his current expression. In the past, if His Highness heard that another man had approached the princess consort with ill intentions, His Highness would definitely fly into a rage and tear him to pieces. But now there was no reaction at all. It was obvious how abnormal this was. Under normal circumstances, even if a man didn't have feelings for his wife, he would still be possessive and wouldn't tolerate others touching her. Why didn't he have any reaction? Was it because he didn't care at all? If that was the case, His Highness should have ordered the death of the female goo poison's owner. The male goo poison's owner was absolutely loyal to the female goo poison's owner, and would protect her without question. But if the female goo poison died, the male goo poison would die with her. This was probably because the woman who created the goo poison wanted a man to have absolute feelings for her, and didn't want to drag him down with her because she loved him. As long as he didn't do it himself, everything would be fine. According to His Highness's personality, how could he be willing to be controlled by others? He was only affected by the goo poison's owner's emotions, not his personality. In fact, without the goo poison's shackles, he would only be more unscrupulous. But he didn't. Except for the time when the female goo poison's owner wanted to get close to him, he didn't do anything else. Was he affected by the goo poison, or was he still concerned about the princess consort's safety? Li Hongyuan closed his eyes again. Get ready. We'll settle this tomorrow. Yes, master. Put out the lights and get out. The three of them didn't make a sound. They quietly put out the lights, went out, and closed the door. Li Hongyuan was in the dark. His situation wasn't very good. The goo poison's influence was actually more serious than his subordinates expected. The reason why he was completely cold like ice was that he couldn't easily affect his emotions. Once his emotions fluctuated, the goo poison's influence would be aggravated. If it was aggravated, it meant that he might inexplicably have feelings for the female goo poison's owner, which was something Li Hongyuan was very resistant to. He only had his emotions locked, not his memory. Perhaps he couldn't feel his love for Jingwan, but the bits and pieces of his time with Jingwan were very clear memories. If he looked at those memories without emotions, he couldn't be completely indifferent. On the contrary, perhaps because he had his emotions locked, he didn't have any emotions to restrain his abnormal possessiveness. He wanted to lock Jingwan up. Therefore, how could he not care about the person who dared to peep at Jingwan? It was just the first time he lost control of his emotions, and he was almost controlled by the goo poison. Therefore, he had been suppressing himself and suppressing his emotions in all aspects. This was similar to the state when Jingwan fell into a deep sleep. He was extremely tense. That kind of feeling was definitely uncomfortable. If one's willpower wasn't extremely strong, it was absolutely impossible to do it. It should be known that according to the history of the barbarians, the goo poison had been around for thousands of years, and there had never been a precedent of failure. There were many strong-willed bigwigs, but in the end, they couldn't escape from it. It was like an instinct of an irrational beast. Li Hongyuan slept very little at night, even less than before he married Jingwan. Moreover, it was very light. Even if he slept, he was only in a half-awake state. This was because he was in a dream now, and his emotions in the dream were very strong. The suppression was too strong. Li Hongyuan's face was like an iceberg, but under the ice layer, it was like a volcano erupting to the extreme. The ice layer outside was very hard, but in fact it was also very fragile. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't break no matter how hard it was knocked. However, if the opportunity was right, it might break with a light tap. What was the result of a volcano eruption? The people were in a terrible situation. Although Jingwan had a good sleeping environment, she didn't sleep very well. In addition to the deliberate noise outside the simple hut, it was also because she always dreamed. The things in the dream were naturally not so wonderful. She had been wandering in a half-asleep state, and people outside could feel her uneasiness. Jingwan finally woke up completely, but she didn't make any noise and didn't intend to get up. In the dark night, even if outsiders couldn't see her, it couldn't change the fact that her eyes were empty and lifeless. The child in her belly suddenly moved. Jingwan came back to her senses and reached out to gently stroke her belly. Li Hongyuan was also uncomfortable. The dream that almost disappeared a few days ago came again at this time. And it came fiercely, with the momentum of monstrous waves, ruthlessly sweeping towards him. The situation in the dream made him unable to wake up for a while. The violent mood fluctuations made the goo poison that was originally quiet move violently, affecting Li Hongyuan's mood. It was simply a vicious cycle. The male goo poison was so obvious, how could the female goo poison not react? If it reacted, how could its master not notice it? As a result, the door of the house at the other end was opened. A beautiful woman, wearing a foreign costume, crossed the threshold gracefully and walked gracefully towards Li Hongyuan's side. However, the woman's walking posture seemed to be somewhat inconsistent with her temperament. Her appearance was obviously bright and flamboyant, and her dress showed enthusiasm, but her posture was restrained and quiet. The woman was blocked outside the door by Li Hongyuan's subordinates, but the woman didn't mind. She raised a shallow smile, and her whole person became lively in an instant. The corners of her eyes were raised, and the red lips were upturned. Even without deliberate seduction, she could make people charming and affectionate. Her whole person was like a burning flame, hot and strong, making people unconsciously sink into it. However, Li Hongyuan's subordinates were like soulless puppets, completely ignoring her. When the woman encountered such a situation for the first time, she might have been angry. How could anyone escape from her beauty and charm? Over and over again she got used to it. Her whole mind was on Li Hongyuan. A man that even the love-locking goo poison couldn't lock. He was indeed worthy of her attention. The strong desire to conquer made her throw everyone else aside. As far as she knew, the love-locking goo poison had indeed appeared before, but it didn't succeed from the beginning. Therefore, when Li Hongyuan didn't fall in love with her at the first moment, she wasn't surprised. If it really succeeded immediately, she would be disappointed. She liked challenging things. And these days she didn't give up. On one hand, she used various methods to influence him, and on the other hand, she waited quietly. She originally thought that the best opportunity would be when the Jean Princess consort appeared. To be honest, to let that woman, who seemed to be soaking in a honey pot, watch helplessly as her husband hugged another woman and whispered sweet words to her. That helpless and disbelieving look made people feel exceptionally happy. But she didn't expect this opportunity to be brought forward. But this was also good. Are you sure you want to stop me? Your master isn't in a good condition now. However, the secret guards guarding the door were still indifferent. Even if they didn't completely doubt her words, they didn't intend to move aside. All right, I'll wait here. Anyway, the longer I delay, the higher my chances of success. The woman smiled gently and elegantly, which didn't match that face of hers. Others might feel that her charm was boundless, but those who had a clear mind only felt that it was strange and unpredictable. The female goo that activated the love-locking goo poison continuously influenced the male goo. The male goo's reaction became more and more intense, and Li Hongyuan's suppression on it seemed to be weakening bit by bit. It was like an invisible war. On the other side, Jingwan once again fell into a half-awake state. Dreams came one after another. No matter what kind of dream it was, as the person in the dream, even though the sun was shining brightly, the environment wasn't very clear or bright. However, Jingwan's dream this time was a little unusual. She didn't know where she was. It seemed like she was running for her life. There were people around her, and they were doing their best to protect her. One by one they died. As for her, even though she was pregnant, she was still skilled in archery and horse riding. However, because she had been running around for a long time, she didn't have a fixed place to stay. She couldn't eat or sleep well, and her body gradually couldn't bear it. She became thinner and thinner. If it wasn't for her good foundation, she might have lost her child long ago. Under such circumstances, the child was born prematurely, and in the end, it was difficult to give birth. In the middle of nowhere, there were only guards around her who didn't know anything about this. She couldn't give birth to the child, and in the end, she chose to cut open her stomach. Jingwan held her stomach. She didn't know when, but fine beads of sweat had appeared on her forehead. Her mouth overflowed with painful moans. She seemed to know that she was dreaming, but she couldn't wake up. Moreover, it was clearly a dream, but she seemed to feel a sharp pain. Hei Mei was guarding outside. How could she not sense anything at this time? She hurriedly opened the small door made of branches. The fire outside was cast in, and Jingwan's happy face was clearly shown. Your Highness, Sister Hei panicked. Your Highness, how are you? Where are you feeling unwell? Your Highness, don't scare this servant, Your Highness. Sister Hei was very regretful, very regretful. Why didn't she learn something in this area? Otherwise, she wouldn't be unable to do anything at this time. How could such a movement not attract attention? Sun Yilin and Fu Rong quickly came over. The worry and anxiety on their faces were not fake. Hei Mei was like a mother hen protecting her calf. They were not allowed to get close at all. Hei Mei, don't be capricious. Now Princess and the child are more important, Fu Rong softly advised. Hei Mei stared at her angrily. She wanted to ask her who she was showing her attitude to. Wasn't she the one who took Princess out of White Dragon Temple? If Princess stayed in White Dragon Temple, how could such a thing happen? However, Hei Mei also knew the severity of the matter at this time, so she didn't argue with them. The simple hut was quickly and carefully opened. Sun Yilin carefully lifted Jingwan's upper body, took out a medicine, and was about to feed it to Jingwan. But he heard a sound. A short arrow was shot from the dark and directly shot through Sun Yilin's hand. The medicine in his hand naturally fell to the ground. Sun Yilin groaned in pain, and then there was a small sound in the forest. Before other people could react, the black shadows in the forest rushed out one after another. Dozens of people quickly controlled the scene. Just by looking at their movements, they knew that they were definitely not ordinary people. In addition to the initial groan, Sun Yilin's other hand was holding Jingwan steadily. He turned a blind eye to the bloody hand and the arrow in his hand. One of the black-clad people went straight to Sun Yilin. with an indescribable cold breath. Compared with others, there was no bloody smell. However, the momentum was absolutely not to be underestimated. The footsteps were steady and powerful. When the other party came closer, Sun Yilin saw clearly that it was a woman. Judging from her appearance, she was at most in her early 30s, but it was difficult to judge her age from her behavior. However, the other party seemed to give him an inexplicable sense of familiarity. She quickly took out the medicine and quickly fed it into Jingwan's mouth. During this time, Heimei subconsciously tried to stop her, but she couldn't stop her at all. Heimei was so anxious that her eyes turned red. In a situation where she had no choice, she could only watch Sun Yilin feed Wang Fei the medicine. At least, she could feel that Sun Yilin wouldn't really hurt Wang Fei, but this unknown person. Who are you? What did you feed Wang Fei? If she wasn't firmly suppressed, Heimei probably would have hit her directly. Heimei, you knew that princess left White Dragon Temple, but you didn't stop her. This crime, I will go back and reason with you. This voice couldn't be more familiar. Heimei was a little sluggish. Mama? Mama Gong snorted coldly and ignored her. Young Master Sun, please step aside. Along the way, she didn't know how many times she wanted to rush out and chop Sun Yilin directly. In fact, Sun Yilin was not surprised by the appearance of this group of people. Thinking about it, a person like Li Hongyuan could deceive everyone. How could his mind be so meticulous? How could he let them take Princess out of White Dragon Temple so easily? It made sense that there were people secretly protecting her along the way. And it was very likely that he had his own reasons for letting Princess leave White Dragon Temple. And if he really did something to Jingwan along the way, he would probably be dead. Jingwan moved from Sun Yilin's arms to Mama Gong's arms. Mama Gong took Jingwan's pulse and carefully touched her belly and lower body. She could feel that the child was moving, and her lower body was not wet. She was slightly relieved. There should be no blood. However, she couldn't let her sleep like this. Princess consort. She gently tried to wake her up, but it obviously didn't work. Mama Gong was worried that Princess had been poisoned again. Ayuan. Jingwan was suddenly trapped in the dream, and her body swayed uneasily. Princess, wake up. Let me take you to His Highness. You will see His Highness soon. Princess. Sun Yilin saw this and heard Jingwan call Ayuan again and again. If she didn't love him to the core, she wouldn't be like this. He lowered his eyes and pulled out the arrow in his hand expressionlessly. Then he walked to one side, casually applied some medicine, and tore a piece of white cloth to wrap it. That was all. He glanced at Jingwan, who was still in the dream, and didn't know what she was dreaming about. Some things, even if he didn't want to believe it, were the truth. The others were all detained, but those who resisted were killed directly. Of course, there was no trace of blood left. Anyway, they now knew the specific location of their master, and these people were worthless. As for Sun Yilin, he didn't do anything to him, not knowing whether it was because of his cleverness or other reasons. Outside Li Hongyuan's room, the woman in a foreign dress smiled brighter and brighter. She was so happy that she was about to seize the fruit of victory, and the bell in her hand was ringing. At a certain moment, her smile widened again. She thought to herself, "It's done." However, in an instant, her smile froze on her face. Wan, Li Hongyuan's voice suddenly sounded in the room. The people outside, whether it was the woman or Li Hongyuan's subordinates, were all in disbelief. The woman spat out a mouthful of blood. Her body swayed slightly, and she almost fell to the ground. She couldn't believe that she had succeeded, but the male parasite was completely suppressed. Not only that, the male parasite almost died, which affected the female parasite in her body and caused her to be injured. The female parasite wanted the male parasite's absolute loyalty and love, but she gave the male parasite her own life. That's right, if the female parasite died, the male parasite was unaffected. On the other hand, if the male parasite died, the female parasite died. As for the latter, they didn't know what had happened to make their master let out such a miserable and desperate cry. Granny Gong worked tirelessly, and Jingwan suddenly woke up. Her eyes were filled with extreme pain, and tears fell from the corners of her eyes drop by drop. Jingwan didn't recover for a long time. Princess consort, princess consort. Granny Gong was very worried. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/157436332. HTML. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book: www.bicken.com. Bicken.com Mobile Edition. Chapter 570. Jingwan raised her head mechanically and looked at the familiar yet strange face in front of her. She then recognized who it was. Nanny, I heard Ayuan calling me. Her tears were still falling drop by drop. Nanny Gong didn't know what she dreamed of that made her so sad. It made one's heart ache. Don't be sad, princess. We will see His Highness soon. After a long while, Jingwan finally recovered. She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes and calmed down. However, even if she took the pregnancy medicine, the effect was not so fast. She still felt a little uncomfortable now, so she still leaned on Nanny Gong and didn't move. She stroked her belly from time to time. As she slowly recalled the dream, she suspected that it might not have been a simple dream regarding her husband's past life. Even though he did not explain it to her in detail and only mentioned it vaguely, she seemed to be able to make some connections now. Perhaps it was something that he had experienced in his past life. It might be a little absurd to think like this, but Jingwan felt that it was the truth. It was the truth. She could feel the pain and sadness in such a tragic end in the dream. What about the person who experienced it bit by bit? This was not the most important thing. Even if she died tragically, she was still dead. The person who was really suffering was the one who was alive. Her family didn't know what happened, so it might be better. But what about him? Jingwan didn't dare to imagine how she survived that period of time. If it were her, she might have completely collapsed, let alone become the emperor and create a prosperous dynasty. At that time, she might not have understood his deep feelings. She didn't know what he had experienced after her death. But from her point of view now, it was a very cruel thing to entrust the child to him and ask him to take care of the child. What was left could be a spiritual sustenance, or the real culprit who opened the scars again and again. Tears unconsciously rolled in her eyes again. Your Highness, Mama Gong called out worriedly. At this time, even though Nanny Gong was dressed in black, she was not the fierce female protector. Instead, she had been by Jingwan's side for a long time. Even though she was strict and proper, her aura was gentle. No matter how one looked at her, she did not look like a decisive person. I'm fine. Jingwan rubbed her eyes and held back her tears. Mama, let's go find His Highness now. She couldn't wait any longer. She couldn't suppress her longing for him anymore. At this moment, it completely exploded. She wanted to see him. Every cell in her body was clamoring to see him. She wanted 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 to see him. Okay, let's go now. At this time, naturally, whatever Jingwan said was the truth. No one had the heart to go against her wishes. However, Jingwan's condition didn't seem to have recovered completely. Under such circumstances, there was still a huge risk for her to go on the road. They had to take care of her emotions, but they couldn't ignore her health. For a moment, they were in a dilemma. When Mama Gong gently stroked her belly, Jingwan realized that what she needed now was rest. She unconsciously clenched her fists. In the end, she suppressed the intense longing again. This might be the only child between her and Ayuan. If it was gone, there probably wouldn't be another one in the future. Mama, do you have anything on you that can calm me down? Rest for another 2 hours. It was good that Jingwan could control her emotions. Yes, Your Highness. Rest assured. When it's time, I'll call you. Jingwan nodded, closed her eyes, and tried to empty her mind as much as possible. It was not an easy thing to do. However, as the saying goes, a mother is strong. When there was no one to rely on, she would be tenacious and have extraordinary perseverance. Li Hongyuan knew the Luo Jingwan best in his previous life. No matter how she changed on the outside, she never changed on the inside. Under the effect of the calming incense, Jingwan fell into a deep sleep. This time she didn't have any dreams. It seemed that she slept very well. During this process, Mama Gong had been paying attention to Jingwan's situation. Fortunately, she had gradually stabilized. Mama Gong put her hand on Jingwan's belly. "Good child, now you know how to care for your mother." As if in response to her words, she felt a slight squirming under her belly. This time, Nurse Gong smiled very sincerely. Regardless of whether it was the little heir or the little Canton princess, he would be the most outstanding and filial child. When 2 hours were up, they confirmed that Jingwan had almost recovered. Although she was still far from her peak state, it was not something that could be recovered in a short time. She needed a quiet and stable environment to recuperate slowly. Obviously, such conditions did not exist now. It was better to settle the matter as soon as possible and return to the capital. When Jingwan woke up, she found that during this period of time, they had made a sedan chair. Although it looked simple, it was as delicate as possible. It was cushioned with a thick and soft blanket, so there was no need to worry about its warmth or comfort. Mama Gong did not let Jingwan get up. She directly carried Jingwan and put her on the sedan chair. After tucking in the corner of the blanket, Mama Gong made a silent gesture. For people came forward and lifted the sedan chair. Then the surrounding scenery began to recede. The speed of receding was quite fast. However, Jingwan did not feel the slightest bump. As for Mama Gong, she was by her side and remained relatively still. She didn't even move up or down. It was obvious that the 4 sedan bearers were walking at the same pace. She was also walking at the same pace as them. Seeing this, Jingwan's heart relaxed a little. With these people around, it meant that her husband had already made arrangements. In that case, his own safety shouldn't be a problem. "Your Highness, we are going a little too fast now. You may feel dizzy. Take a rest. Soon, we will see His Highness," Mama Gong said softly. "Okay." She could feel that things might have really reached the most critical stage. Now there was no point in thinking too much. Things should be as they were, one step at a time. Thinking about things before reaching that stage seemed to be of no use other than wasting her mind. And right now, the taboo thing for her was probably worrying. As for Sun Yilin, Jingwan did not want to think about it anymore. It did not matter whether he had a reason or not. Some things were done. After all, Jingwan had already thought it through. Even if her husband wanted to kill her, she would not frown, let alone now. Therefore, no matter what his ending was, she would accept it. No, it had nothing to do with her. When the time came, the only thing she could do was to hide his actions and not let him implicate Sun Yijia. Sun Yijia was her sister-in-law, her best friend, and the mother of her nephew and niece. Sun Yijia did not know anything about Sun Yilin. She was living a good life now. She should not be implicated by Sun Yilin. Even though in this feudal dynasty, there were many cases of guilt by association, Jingwan was at most half a native of Qiyuan. As long as she had the memory of her previous life, she could not be completely assimilated into this society. In her previous life, no matter how heinous the crime was, there was no mention of the family members being implicated. However, if the matter was too serious, Jingwan would not be able to bear no grudges against her sister-in-law like before. After all, when she saw her, she would inevitably think of Sun Yilin. Not being implicated did not mean that she would not vent her anger. She was not a saint. She was not close to Sun Yijia, but she was not closer to her husband. Sometimes, it was already the limit to be able to control her emotions and not vent it on the innocent. Therefore, she could only hope that things would not be too bad. Jingwan inadvertently looked up at the sky. It seemed that the sky was about to brighten. It seemed that tonight was much faster than she thought. Yuan Li Hongyuan's current situation was not good. He was trapped in the dream. Once again, he clearly experienced the darkest and most painful period. Did he and Jingwan enter the same dream? Or was it a coincidence that they had the same dream at the same time? However, now no one could get close to him. Although he was still leaning against the wall with his eyes closed, without any movement, and even his breathing was very weak, his attack power was actually very terrifying. It was as if he had lost his mind. He attacked indiscriminately. Whoever got close to him would die. Even if Gong Jio wanted to help him, There was nothing he could do. Therefore, he could only watch helplessly. As for the woman, she had already been thrown far away by the people around Li Hongyuan. Although their actions were gentle because of the substitute gu, it was also a fact that she was thrown away. A woman being treated like this was as embarrassing as it could be. Unfortunately, even though Li Hongyuan was currently being controlled, anyone by his side could not be underestimated. Furthermore, this was the Qiyuan region. Even if it was an unknown desolate mountain or forest, it was still Li Hongyuan's territory. Even if the other party had an absolute advantage in terms of numbers, they would not dare to easily do anything to this group of killing gods. Thus, after that woman was injured and embarrassed, she was so angry that her face turned ashen and she gnashed her teeth. In the end, she could only forcefully endure it. Naturally, the determination and hatred in her eyes became even more obvious and intimidating. Li Hongyuan's secret guards saw that this woman was not so simple. Looking at her, she might even have a grudge against their master. Moreover, her obsession seemed to be a little too deep. This was even more strange. However, they were very clear that they had never seen such a woman around their master. This could only mean that her face did not belong to her. Or, she had a very close relationship with someone who had a deep relationship with their master. Perhaps there would be an answer to these questions soon. Even if there was no answer, it did not matter. No matter if it was love or hatred, it was all settled. It was not a big deal. Who would care about who she was? The woman returned to her room and smashed everything in the room. Her anger seemed to have distorted her whole face. However, as she smashed, she suddenly stopped. She felt a burning pain on her face. Then her face suddenly oozed blood and seemed to be eroding little by little. She covered her face with her hands in horror, and hurriedly put on her gauze hat. Guards, bring a sacrifice from the dungeon. Hurry, hurry. She was furious and anxious. A woman's voice came from outside. However, it was not the official language of Qiyuan. It did not seem to be a common local language in Qiyuan. It should be a more minority language. It might not even exist in Qiyuan. Soon there was a noise outside. A beautiful girl, who looked to be at most 13 or 14 years old, was dragged in by two women who were also wearing alien costumes. They threw her to the ground rudely. The girl probably knew what was going to happen to her. From her eyes to her expression, she was full of deep fear. However, she could not speak. She could only make whimpering sounds from her throat. She knelt on the ground and kowtowed. Even if she could not speak, it was obvious that she was begging for mercy. The woman bent down. Ko Dan's hand, which was as red as blood, pinched the girl's chin. However, that hand, which should have been smooth, delicate, and beautiful, now looked like it had shrunk. Blue veins bulged out. Her skin was dry and dull, and there were slight wrinkles. It's your honor to be my sacrifice. But you don't have to be so excited. The woman's other hand was gently caressing the girl's face. You're really beautiful. However, you're also really annoying. It was as if she was whispering to her lover. However, the woman's fingernails scratched the girl's face. From light red marks to bloody marks, the girl's eyes were filled with fear and pain. Perhaps it was because of the deep fear that she could not move, but her body was trembling uncontrollably. Perhaps it was because of the sweet blood on the girl's face, but the woman's arm suddenly moved. Gradually, on the inner side of her wrist, a large bulge appeared. Her skin was pushed open, and it even seemed a little translucent. When it was pushed to a certain extent, it broke open with a bang. A dark mass of something crawled out from inside. Upon closer inspection, it looked like a spider covered in fine fur. And because the girl's line of sight was the closest, she seemed to vaguely see a human face on the spider. She was originally just an ordinary peasant girl. Because her family was relatively wealthy, she had always been pampered. She was innocent and naive. One day, she was deceived and kidnapped. Soon, she knew the fate that she might face. Because she had seen it more than once in front of her. She had been terrified all day, hoping that she could be rescued, until this moment. The last desire to live made her struggle with all her might. She suddenly exerted force. The hand that was pinching the girl's chin directly cut through her skin. Blood flowed out, causing the spider to become even more restless. And because of the other party's resistance, The woman became angry. She grabbed the girl's hair and directly stuffed the spider into the girl's mouth. I gave you face, but you don't want it. The girl was still struggling. However, the struggle now was perhaps not just for the sake of survival. However, the skin of the woman who was separated from the spider became worse and worse. If it was only a young woman, then a middle-aged woman, then perhaps she had already become an old woman. It was just that no one could see her face, so no one knew how terrifying she had become. However, because of that change, the woman became more and more irritable. The young life under her hand became the target of her venting. She pinched and kicked like a crazy woman. And the girl gradually stopped struggling. She aged visibly until she looked like she was 70 or 80 years old. And finally, the woman released her hand in disgust. The old girl, who only had one last breath left, fell to the ground. Then, a bright red spider crawled out from her collar. Compared to the black spider from before, it was more than a size bigger. Following the woman's extended hand, it crawled back into her body. The wound on her wrist instantly disappeared without a trace. And the originally aged skin also became smooth and elastic again. Her hand was also slender and jade-like fingers. During the entire process, the woman seemed as if she had eaten a celestial medicine. She let out sighs that could cause one's bones to soften. And the evil aura on her body also disappeared without a trace because she had recovered her youthful beauty. She took off her veil and smiled. She was still that peerless beauty that could cause one's soul to turn upside down. Without needing her to say anything, the girl on the ground was dragged out like filth. Get ready, I want to take a bath, the woman said with a bit of laziness. And the two women serving by the side narrowed their eyes. Saintess, do you want to take a normal bath or? Do I even need to say this kind of thing? What use do I have for you? The laziness instantly turned sharp. Saintess, please forgive us. We will go and prepare for the Saintess. The two begged for forgiveness in fear, then hurriedly left, afraid that the Saintess would use them to feed the beauty goo if they were a step late. Beauty goo, as the name implied, could make an ugly person beautiful, and could also make a person maintain their youthful beauty. However, from the actions of that so-called Saintess earlier, it could be seen how cruel the method to maintain one's beauty was. For the beauty goo to be effective, it needed to be fed with young and beautiful women, and those unmarried beautiful women were the best choice. The more beautiful the sacrifice was, the longer the user could maintain their beauty. However, no matter how beautiful the sacrifice was, it would only be effective for a month at most. After the effect was over, the user would have to eat more sacrifices. However, as the number of sacrifices increased, the effect would gradually weaken. And as the user's age increased, the effect would also weaken. In the end, a life might only last for 2 or 3 days, or even 2 or 3 lives at a time. It was enough to show how vicious this beauty goo was. And those who used the beauty goo to maintain their beauty had already surpassed the category of humans. They were worse than beasts. And this Saintess was actually not very old, only in her 20s. One sacrifice could maintain her beauty for a month, but she still wanted to use the blood bath. Blood bath naturally used blood, and the source of the blood was the same as the sacrifice. However, how much blood could a person have, and how many lives would be sacrificed in one blood bath? Although the effect of the blood bath was to maintain one's beauty, at the beginning of using the beauty goo, it could only be used as icing on the cake. Correspondingly, because the beauty goo was raised too well, the beauty goo would become greedy and want to eat more sacrifices, and eat more frequently. This so-called Saintess, when did she have the sudden urge to use a blood bath? Such a person, words like snake, scorpion, and beast were no longer enough to describe her. A bathtub was quickly carried in. Then, when she saw the amount of blood in the bathtub, the Saintess was furious. Why is there so little blood? In fact, it was already quite a lot. If she sat in the bathtub, it would reach her lower abdomen. Saintess, please forgive us. There are no more sacrifices in the dungeon. This place is remote, and there is no one around. The sacrifices were all found from other places. Because of the recent arrests, the Qiyuan authorities have been paying attention to the nearby places. Shut up, I don't want to listen to your explanations. No matter what method you use, continue to get me more sacrifices. Now it's time for you to sacrifice yourselves, the saintess said coldly. The two women's eyes were filled with deep fear, and their bodies trembled slightly. However, they did not panic and quickly knelt down. It's our honor to sacrifice ourselves for the saintess. However, there are no other sisters around now. When the time comes, who will serve the saintess? The saintess knew that they were just making excuses, but it was the truth. She needed someone to serve her. I'll forgive you for now. Go and get some water to add to the bathtub. How am I supposed to bathe with so little blood? The effect of the blood would definitely be weakened if it was added to the bathtub. This made the saintess very unhappy. However, it was better than nothing. Thus, after she was ready, she submerged herself in. After a while, she slowly raised her head. Her face was covered in blood. It was disgusting no matter how one looked at it, but she enjoyed it. Perhaps it was the effect of the beauty parasite, but the blood gradually faded. In the end, it became clear water. The saintess stood up from the bathtub. She looked rosy and lustrous. Her skin was even better than the best silk. She used the softest cloth to dry it bit by bit. Standing in front of the mirror, she carefully observed her body inch by inch. It was as if she was looking at the most perfect piece of art. Narcissism might not be a big deal, but narcissism to a certain extent was no different from a pervert. However, it was already winter, and there was definitely no heat in this thatched hut in the wilderness. Was she not afraid of the cold? The cold might be tolerable, but the changes in the body could not be eliminated just by tolerating it. However, this saintess was dressed very lightly before. Even those who practice martial arts all year round had thicker clothes than her, but there was no change in her body. This was very abnormal. After using the blood to nourish her body, the injuries caused by the emotion-sealing parasite seemed to have disappeared. Digression. https://www.yangguiwaiwo.com/11/11807/1577338. HTML. Please click here to report an error. Registration is not required. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book, www.yangguiwaiwo.com. Bikugo mobile reading website, yangguiwaiwo.com. Chapter 571. After admiring his body, a deep darkness appeared in her eyes. She licked her blood-red lips and said, "Should I say, you are indeed the man that I have taken a fancy to. Even at this point, you can still survive. Things are getting more and more interesting." She turned around and wanted to see her prey again. Even if she couldn't get close, the closer she got, the stronger the connection between the love-locking parasites would be. Of course, the love-locking parasites couldn't be more than 10 miles away from each other. The farther they were, the more irritable the parasites would be. Correspondingly, the master would also feel very uncomfortable. What's going on? I can't sense anything at all? It's impossible. How could this happen? The holy maiden frowned. Things seemed to be a little out of her expectations. She was originally very sure of this, but now she couldn't help but have a trace of doubt. In fact, from the beginning, some of the feelings that should have been pleasurable were not so penetrating. How should she put it? It was like the meridians all over her body. They should have been unobstructed, but some subtle places seemed to be blocked. She didn't know where exactly the blockage was. She ignored it because she couldn't find it, but now this feeling became stronger again. He had spent a lot of time and energy, but things didn't develop as expected. This was already annoying. If things went out of control, then it was even more intolerable. She took the risk again to get close to Li Hongyuan's house, but she was also mercilessly blocked. The holy maiden didn't advance rashly, but she also didn't retreat. At this moment, it seemed that everyone was immobilized. They were motionless in their original positions. The sky was getting brighter. "Come in." In the house, Li Hongyuan finally spoke. As soon as he spoke, the world seemed to come alive. Even the holy maiden felt the existence of the male parasite in his body. In terms of perception, it wasn't that she didn't gain anything. At least, the male parasite's control over him seemed to have increased. So she must have thought too much before. Master. The person at the door hurried in. Prepare water for a bath. Previously, he was not much different from being pulled out of the water. After sitting for so long, his wet clothes seemed to have dried a lot. It was quite uncomfortable to stick to his body. Moreover, he was a bit of a neat freak. Li Hongyuan's bathing process was neither fast nor slow. It was quite normal. The only abnormal thing was that Gong Jio was serving him. However, since Eunuch Mu was not around, it seemed that anyone could serve him. Stepping out of the door, he welcomed the faint light of dawn. He was incomparably handsome and spirited. Perhaps because he was emotionless, he didn't seem to have the slightest bit of mortal aura. He was more and more like a god from the 9 heavens. When facing him, one only wanted to submit. He tilted his head and looked at the so-called saintess. Because of the emotion-sealing goo, they were supposed to be the closest people to each other. But now he was looking at her as if she was nothing. She herself was not so relaxed. No matter how proud and conceited she was, she could not help but tremble. Her legs went soft. If she did not grit her teeth and hold on, she might have made a fool of herself on the spot. It was as if he didn't take the other party seriously at all. For some people, what was even more intolerable than contempt was disregard. And this saintess was one of them. The trembling of his body became more and more obvious. This time, it was due to anger. Tell the servants to prepare a meal for the princess. He had no feelings for her, but he still kept thinking about her. This made the saintess heart burn with pain. Jealousy was about to drown her. However, no matter how turbulent her emotions were, they could not affect Li Hongyuan. Although her emotions actually affected the emotion-sealing goo in his body, what could she do? No matter how unwilling she was, there was nothing she could do. After coming to her senses, she suddenly realized that the Luo Jingwan was coming. She knew it clearly, but how did Li Hongyuan know it? Logically speaking, he shouldn't know. It was a surprise she prepared for him. Now, looking at the people around him, she found that they were not surprised at all. They looked calm, which showed that they had known the news for a long time. So, things were really beyond her expectation? Damn it. Calm down, calm down. Even if it was beyond her expectation, Luo Jingwan still had the substitute goo in his body. Therefore, even if things were not so perfect, she still had the initiative. They could not touch her. On the contrary, they had to protect her well. As long as she was alive, there would always be a chance to turn the tables. She had endured it time and time again. Back then, when she was in the most pain, she had endured it. So what if she endured it now? The meal was ready. Li Hongyuan also ate some. Compared to before, he ate more. Li Hongyuan put down his chopsticks and slowly wiped his hands with a handkerchief. He looked as if he had completely recovered his former elegance. There were no negative emotions, and he was no longer as cold as before. When the princess arrives, serve her the meal well. Then come to the back to find me. Yes. It was so normal that it was abnormal. During this period of time, he had been abnormal. Suddenly he became normal. That was abnormal. Since the princess was here, and she was still attentive and considerate, what was wrong with staying and waiting? Was it because they had no feelings for each other? Taking care of her was their former friendship, but he could not accompany her everywhere like before. In fact, Jingwan and the others were already outside the colonel. But because they did not know the situation inside, they did not act rashly for the time being. And the people outside had basically been dealt with. When they were discussing how to contact Li Hongyuan, the person in the call came out. It was the leader of the guards. Greetings, Your Highness. Normally, Jingwan's heart should have calmed down a little after seeing him. However, for some reason, her heart was beating a little faster. It wasn't because of nervousness or excitement. It felt more like a bad feeling. Where is your prince? Is he okay now? This was the thing that worried Jingwan the most. As for the others, Your Highness, His Highness is fine. His Highness had ordered the servants to prepare breakfast. He was just waiting for you. Jingwan unconsciously clenched her fists. If so, he should have come to see her in person. But he did not. What is the situation? Tell me clearly. Don't hide anything. Actually, Guard Qian was not clear about his master's condition. So he said whatever he wanted to say. Except for the substitute goo, he did not hide anything. The reason why he hid the substitute goo was that he did not want her to feel burdened. But he did not expect that Jingwan actually knew. Emotion-locking goo. Damn it, Jingwan really did not hate those worms as much as she did at this moment. But he could resist such a domineering and strange thing. Jingwan felt warm and distressed. She knew that it was not easy to resist something that had never failed. Did he have no feelings for her anymore? Although Jingwan was a little sad, but it did not matter. It could be solved. Moreover, if a sincere relationship could be easily swayed by a worm, it would be too childish. If it could be swayed by external things, it could only mean that it was not real enough, not deep enough. She believed in him. Jingwan loosened her clenched fists and lightly exhaled. Then let's go in. She wanted to see who was coveting her husband. Jingwan's reaction was out of Guard Qian's expectation. But, after thinking carefully, it seemed that it was understandable. Their feelings were sincere, and their trust for each other was incomparable. With Guard Qian leading the way, the journey was smooth and unobstructed. But, it was someone who thought of ways to bring her here. There was really no reason to stop her. Moreover, the initiative was in their hands. Perhaps they did not even care whose hands she was in now. There was nothing special about the colonel basically. It was obvious at a glance. Why did the other party choose such a place? Jingwan did not believe that there was no reason. Jingwan originally thought that her husband, even if he did not go out to pick her up, should be the first to see her after she came in. But now, there was not even a shadow of him. And the person who carried the female goo of the emotion-locking spell was also not seen. However, according to Jingwan's estimation, the female goo of the substitute goo in her body should also be with that woman. Because only in this way, many things would make sense. Regarding this point, Guard Qian hid it from her, and she did not intend to ask. After entering the room and seeing the food on the table, Jingwan still did not see the person she wanted to see most. The bad feeling intensified again. Where is your prince? Where is he now? It was reasonable that he did not go to pick her up. But how could he explain, avoiding question mark? Princess, Prince is at the back of the room. You can eat first. I will take you there later. There's no need. I'll see him first. This person was just inches away. If he didn't see him, how could he eat? Princess, when Jingwan turned around, Guard Qian reached out to stop her. Please forgive me, Princess. Prince asked me to invite you to eat first. Don't worry, Prince will be waiting. Even if you don't think for yourself, you should think about the child in your belly. Jingwan looked at him. Even if she had to eat regularly, now it was just a short time. If he insisted that she eat before going, then there might be a reason why she could not eat after seeing him. Guard Qian felt his scalp tingle under Jingwan's gaze, but he was still determined not to give in. Jingwan did not make things difficult for him. She sat down and began to eat. She waved her hand and did not ask Nanny Gong to serve her. It was just a small square table, and she was alone. There was no need to ask others to serve her. It was not as exquisite as the food in the prince's mansion, and it was not as delicious. However, to Jingwan now, everything she ate was the same. It tasted like wax, but she still ate as much as she could. She did not want to think so much about the why. Anyway, she would know in a while, right? However, as she ate, the tears in Jingwan's eyes rolled down her cheeks. She didn't seem to notice it, and continued to stuff food into her mouth. She clearly didn't swallow the food in her mouth. She clearly had good dining etiquette, but now she didn't seem to care about her image and was in a sorry state. Princess, Princess. Nanny Gong called out, trying to stop her. It was better not to eat at all. However, Jingwan did not seem to hear her. Her movements were mechanical. When she tried to swallow, she could not swallow and spit it out. Wang Fei. Mama Gong hurriedly supported her. She took the chopsticks in her hand and patted her back. If you can't eat, then don't eat. Later, Wang Ye will accompany you to eat. Mama Gong really wanted to ask, why was Wang Ye avoiding her? Being stared at by the female guard. Guard Qian was under a lot of pressure. He also wanted to know why. Nanny, I don't want to cry really, but I can't control it. Sometimes people's grievances came so inexplicably. No matter how much she tried to prepare herself, it was useless. It's okay, it's okay. A woman is pregnant and her emotions are changeable. She can do whatever she wants. Granny Gong had been by Jingwan's side for so many years, but she had never seen her so fragile. In the past 2 days, she had shed more tears than she had in the past. Madame Luo had said that her princess consort had never cried much when she was young. She was probably the child who cried the least in the world. Now, she wasn't hysterical and there wasn't much emotion in her eyes, but it was enough to break anyone's heart. After vomiting, she rinsed her mouth and wiped her face. After crying, she seemed to have cried all her emotions away. Jingwan sat upright and looked at Guard Qian. I've eaten. Before Guard Qian could react, Nanny Gong's knife-like gaze had already turned to him. Hurry up and lead the way. Guard Qian felt a little wronged. He did not say that he would not lead the way. Unfortunately, he could only think about it in his heart, and did not dare to talk back. Not to mention Nanny Gong. Even he could not bear to see the princess in this state. Behind the hut, there was a relatively flat piece of land with 2 trees. Li Hongyuan was sitting under one of the trees. In front of him was a small table with a zither on it. However, what was unbelievable was that the saintess was leaning on him as if she had no bones. The back window of the hut was actually open, but it was not closed. What happened inside, not to mention Li Hongyuan, even the saintess heard it. In her eyes, Li Hongyuan looked indifferent on the surface, but his clenched fists, the bulging veins on the back of his hands, and the restless male venomous insect in his body all showed that he was not calm at all. Even in this state, he could still have a reaction. The feelings between them were indeed so deep that it was unbelievable. Was this really the living king of hell in the past? It was obvious that everyone revolved around him, but he gave his heart completely to a woman. This was something that she did not dare to hope for in the past. Although some things were just guesses, the facts proved that her guesses were right. His control over the male venomous insect had increased a little. Yes, it was really something to be happy about. As expected, the opportunity came when our Jean princess consort appeared. However, when others were in pain, she was happy. With a happy mood, she curled up a strand of Li Hongyuan's hair and brushed it gently beside his ear. He was the one who pulled her to his side. She could not even be within 3 steps of him for such a long time. But he took the initiative to reach out to her. Who would believe that there was nothing fishy about it? However, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Even if she knew that he had an ulterior motive, she could not let it go. Li Hongyuan loosened his fist and began to play the zither. Even if he wanted to tear the woman lying on his shoulder into pieces, he resisted the urge to kick her away. Moreover, the influence of the emotion-locking goo on him was getting stronger, but he did not want to do anything. Perhaps it was because of the emotion-locking, he did not feel any heartache. However, there was still a very uncomfortable feeling. Perhaps it was even more uncomfortable than direct heartache. Bypassing the thatched hut, Jingwan stopped the moment she saw her husband. The people around her were shocked and could not believe it. They were even furious. Even if it was their master, their anger could not be quelled. If he had been controlled by the emotion-locking goo from the beginning, perhaps he would not be so angry. However, after so long, they knew that their master was indeed invincible. At this time, when the princess consort appeared, he gave them a head-on blow, making them dizzy and their brains buzzing. How could they not be angry? On the other hand, Jingwan seemed to be very calm. At least on the surface, no emotions could be seen. On the contrary, a certain holy maiden who was prepared to watch a good show was very disappointed. Clearly, she did not even have the appetite to eat because she did not see the princess consort. She was like a daughter flower, which made people very disdainful. Now she was so calm that it was frightening. Not to mention breaking down, her posture was still natural and upright. It was as if she would not move no matter how fierce the storm was. In such a short time, it was as if she had become a completely different person. It was really puzzling. Li Hongyuan also stopped playing the zither, and met Jingwan's gaze without any ripples. The princess consort is here. Then, as if nothing had happened, He moved his gaze away and fell on the holy maiden beside him. He even reached out and touched the bell bracelet on her wrist. Jingwan lifted her feet and slowly walked over. She stood a few steps away from Li Hongyuan. Your Highness, do you still remember what you said before? Jingwan said calmly. She raised her right hand and touched the cuff of her left hand. I have said many things. Your Highness, what are you referring to? Li Hongyuan looked at her carelessly. Perhaps because he did not have feelings for her for the time being, Li Hongyuan could not see Jingwan's true feelings now. However, his intuition told him that his wife was very strange now. However, this was exactly what he wanted. Jingwan slightly tilted her head and smiled. Then, I will use practical actions to tell your Highness. Her smile did not fade. Step by step, she approached Li Hongyuan. When she was behind him, she reached out and touched his neck gently with her fingertips. Her right hand suddenly pulled up the sleeve of her left hand and pulled out the dagger tied to her arm. She raised it and stabbed Li Hongyuan's heart. You said that my sincerity could be exchanged for your life. As long as you change your mind, I can take your life. Jingwan said softly, as if she was whispering the most intimate words to him when they were intimate. Things happened too quickly, in the blink of an eye. Probably no one would have thought that Jingwan would be so ruthless. She did not give anyone time to react at all. For a moment, everyone was scared silly. Even a certain holy maiden, who was still lying on Li Hongyuan's shoulder and blocking Jingwan's arm, widened her eyes. She did not even react to the change of the emotion-locking spell in her body. Jingwan did not stop at all. She pulled out the dagger and stabbed it into the back of the neck of the person under her elbow. Originally, this holy maiden was wearing clothes full of silver ornaments. Jingwan was determined to take her life. Her eyes were very accurate and her hand was very steady. Just from the side of her neck, the dagger, which could cut iron as if it was mud, directly cut off her aorta. Blood instantly gushed out like a fountain. The holy maiden tilted her head in disbelief and looked at Jingwan. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. Then, she fell to the ground just like that. Her eyes were still fixed on Jingwan. Soon, a large pool of blood flowed out from her body. However, although the blood of ordinary people had a fishy smell, her blood had a faint stench. Jingwan held the dagger. Blood dripped from the tip of the dagger. She lowered her eyes and looked at the holy maiden emotionlessly. Coveting my man is a crime worthy of death. Finally, the holy maiden breathed her last. But her eyes were still wide open. Obviously, she died with grievances. In the end, what she felt the most was unwillingness and disbelief. Her short life had been filled with extreme humiliation and ups and downs. She had always believed that she would be able to fight to the end, that she would be the final winner. However, she had been caught off guard and died. She had died. She died in the hands of the most unlikely person. Li Hongyuan sat still. Whether it was because of the death of the holy maiden, the male parasite had lost its effect, or because his feelings were recovering bit by bit in his heart. It was painful, very painful. It was not because of Jingwan's stab, but because he had hurt the person he loved the most. What had already happened, he did not want to pursue it. He reached out and held Jingwan's hand that was still on his shoulder. Jingwan did not resist. It was as if this was still the person closest to her. However, she just stood there. How abnormal was that? Others did not know, but Li Hongyuan felt it the clearest. He got up so quickly that he overturned the zither table in front of him. He turned around and held Jingwan's neck with one hand and her waist with the other. He kissed her fiercely. It was raging and crazy. His mouth kept calling out, "Wan Wan." Jingwan still did not respond. It was as if she had given her husband a blow. After killing her love rival, she also lost her vitality. "Wan Wan, please. Wan, can you answer me? I beg you, please don't be like this. I can explain, really, I can explain. Otherwise, why don't you stab me again? Once is enough. I beg you, please don't let me lose it a second time, Wan." It was said that men did not cry easily. It was only because they had not been deeply hurt. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/1577472 HTML. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book, www.bicken.com. Bicken.com mobile version reading website, mbicken.com. Chapter 572. Who would have thought that things would turn out this way? Who would have the time to resent Li Hongyuan? He was still bleeding. He had seen with his own eyes that Jingwan had stabbed the dagger into his heart. Who knew how serious his injury was? They only thought that it was hard to tell because of the dark color of his clothes. But now, he was hugging Jingwan and refusing to let go. He did not seem to care about his injury at all. If this went on, even if his injury was not serious, he might still lose his life. That was a situation no one wanted to see. Your Highness, please treat your injury first. One after another, they tried to persuade him. However, Li Hongyuan only had eyes for Jingwan. It seemed that his life was not as important as Jingwan's forgiveness. Since they couldn't persuade Li Hongyuan, they could only start with Jingwan. At this time, they were willing to believe that there was a reason behind it. Besides Li Hongyuan himself, Gongjio was the one who knew the most about the whole thing. Gongjio knelt on one knee. Your Highness, His Highness had no choice but to do this because of the special way to remove the emotion sealing spell. Please believe that His Highness only cares about you from the beginning to the end. Whether it is himself or external factors, he has never let you down. He didn't know if Jingwan really listened to his words or because she tasted Li Hongyuan's tears, but she finally reacted. Her empty eyes refocused, the dagger in her hand fell, and her body trembled involuntarily. Wan. His kiss became gentle and fell on her lips again and again. Treat your injury first. Jingwan's voice was a little hoarse and trembling. Wan, are you really so heartless that you won't forgive me? You're not even willing to hug me? If that's the case, I'd rather die in your hands. She knew that half of his words were true and the other half was a trick. She couldn't do anything to him. She compromised and followed his wishes. You win. Hurry up and treat your injury. Or do you really want to leave me alone in this world? Li Hongyuan, let me tell you, without you, I can still live well. Jingwan hugged him tightly and listened to his heartbeat. But this time there was no sense of security. She only felt frightened, as if she could hear the sound of blood flowing. Jingwan hurriedly let go of him and tore off his clothes. Gongjio, hurry up. Gongjio got up and quickly applied acupuncture to stop Li Hongyuan's bleeding. He didn't have a medicine box with him, but he had the best medicine with him. It looked like he was prepared. Li Hongyuan had been holding Jingwan's hand all along, as if he was afraid that she would disappear if he let go. Even if he had sealed his feelings, this person was more important to him than his life. Jingwan looked at him blankly, but she didn't look at him. Instead, she looked at Gongjio's movements. Was he already prepared to take the hit? Was that why he deliberately provoked her? The moment she saw Li Hongyuan, her whole person seemed to be divided. She was at two extremes. She was surprisingly calm, but also completely lost her mind. It could even be said that she was crazy. It seemed like she was thinking too much, but it also seemed like she wasn't thinking at all. Her tolerance was much stronger than expected, but also much weaker. Did she not trust him in her heart? No, she did. Even if seeing is believing, she still believed that what really provoked her was the coldness and ruthlessness in his eyes. There was no trace of her at all. That was why she didn't hesitate to stab him. And that was why she subconsciously deviated from her target. The reason why she made a move was never because she didn't trust him. Under normal circumstances, she probably wouldn't have been able to do it. Sure enough, she was too provoked. Stabbing him once was the same as stabbing him with her own life. If something really happened to him, she might not die with him because she still had a child. However, even if she was alive, she would just be a walking corpse. However, she still had to say that when this man really wanted to lie to her, she couldn't see through him. However, Jingwan didn't know that Li Hongyuan didn't want to lie to her. He was actually using the power of the emotion-sealing goo. He allowed that woman to use the female goo to affect him. In fact, it was a very dangerous thing. If he was careless, he might really have a change of heart. Li Hongyuan didn't seem to feel anything as he let Gongjiu do whatever he wanted to his body. His gaze was always on Jingwan. Looking at her expression, his heart ached. However, even if he had no choice, the damage was done. There would always be some scars left. Even if it couldn't be seen at all, it didn't mean that it didn't exist. Li Hongyuan reached out and gently stroked Jingwan's neck. Does it hurt here? Jingwan frowned slightly and was a little puzzled. It doesn't hurt. Why does it hurt? Ruan Fengfei has the mother goo of the substitute goo in her body. You have the child goo in your body. The child takes the mother's place. You have to bear half of the pain caused by the external force on her body. Li Hongyuan explained, but he saw that Jingwan didn't seem to feel any pain. Was it because the mother goo died, so there was no effect? However, when the mother goo died, the host of the child goo would not die, but would weaken. In fact, Jingwan attacking him was more or less expected. But killing another person without mercy was really unexpected, because she had always been soft-hearted and cherished human life. If he had a little foresight in advance, he would have stopped her. Jingwan forgot about the substitute goo. She didn't realize it when she killed the person. However, it doesn't hurt. It didn't hurt from the beginning to the end. Jingwan's gaze fell on the corpse on the ground. This was killed by her, but she didn't feel any psychological discomfort. The so-called substitute goo, could it be a lie? The purpose is just to restrain you from attacking her? It's not impossible. However, he still needed to confirm it. Although Li Hongyuan had already thought of ways to protect Jingwan's weak body, now there was another possibility. Naturally, he hoped that Jingwan was safe and healthy. However, Jingwan noticed another important point. You said she is Ruan Fengfei? That's right. What his subordinates didn't know he knew. It wasn't that he paid attention to Ruan Fengfei, but it was a coincidence. Ruan Fengfei had a special birthmark under her collarbone. In his previous life, when she threw herself into his arms, he had seen it. Because of its special shape, it left a little impression. And when she wore the barbarian tribe's clothing, the collar was much lower, so he could see it. The impression in the depths of Li Hongyuan's memory was dug out again. Although he didn't remember it immediately, he felt it was familiar. He finally found the origin. Speaking of which, Li Hongyuan's memory was indeed quite good. Jingwan nodded faintly. It was Ruan Fengfei. Then she had a clear conscience. She had long wanted to kill her. Once, after she understood some things, she felt a little regretful that she had died. She didn't expect that she was so lucky. After escaping from Prince Zhongqin's mansion, she never gave up and was always jumping around. Now that she killed her with her own hands, it was a bit like slapping an annoying bug to death instead of killing a person. This time it was impossible for her to jump around. It was too easy for her to die so simply. However, she was simply a cockroach. It was good for her to die so thoroughly. Li Hongyuan's wound was simply treated. Obviously, this was far from enough. The group went back to the house where Li Hongyuan lived before, leaving Ruan Fengfei's body there. Speaking of which, perhaps because she was too confident, Ruan Fengfei didn't have her own people by her side. So, until now those people hadn't found out that she was dead. However, this was also a matter of time. When the time came, it would be a fierce battle. When Gong Jiu further checked the specific condition of Li Hongyuan's injury and treated the wound, Jingwan was still a little absent-minded. What's wrong? Don't worry, it's all right. Li Hongyuan really didn't know how to talk to Jingwan now. He was a little helpless. It seemed that no matter what he said, it would be pale and powerless. Anything he said would be suspected of sophistry. He wanted to avoid it, but some things, if avoided, would only rot in the deep layer. Therefore, he could only try to ease it as much as possible, but it still seemed a little far-fetched. Jingwan looked at him. She didn't deny that she was worried. In fact, she was so worried that her heart almost stopped beating, but she didn't regret it. If I could do it again, I would still stab you. So Wan's heart is very soft to outsiders, but it's as hard as a stone to me. Li Hongyuan pretended to be wronged, but there was a smile in his eyes. It was enough to show that he didn't mind this matter. Well, if there's a next time, I will still do it. At that time, you may not be so lucky. Jingwan stated a fact lightly. You made such a big move to give me time to block it. Sure enough, your heart is actually not hard enough. So according to your reaction speed, you can completely block it. Why didn't you? He didn't even raise his hand. It's a gift from my wife. Naturally, no matter what it is, I have to accept it. Li Hongyuan smiled. Looking at Jingwan's pursed lips, he finally straightened his expression. Today, even if you don't do it, I will do it myself. So, what's the way to solve the love sealing gu? Under normal circumstances, when the female gu dies, the connection between the pair of love sealing gu will also be cut off. But Ruan Fangfei has a substitute gu, so I can't kill her or even hurt her. I can only think of another way. Logically speaking, there's no other way to unlock the love-sealing gu poison. However, there's a special situation where the love-sealing gu poison can't bind both hosts together. The male love-sealing gu poison has someone else in his heart. Then, the love-sealing gu poison can be unlocked by the love-sealing gu poison. Li Hongyuan looked at Jingwan. He wasn't sure if she could accept such an explanation. So, in essence, you want me to hate you? Is it that in your opinion, the deeper the love, the deeper the hatred when betrayed? You also know that I won't rub sand in my eyes. Even if I know it's caused by external factors, I won't accept it? But Yuan, do you know that from the beginning to the end, I have never hated you? I love you with all my heart, and I can't take out the same heart to hate you. Moreover, I have always believed in you. Even if I don't have clear thoughts in my consciousness, this has never changed. Now tell me, did your method succeed, or did I kill Ruan Fangfei to get rid of the love-sealing gu? Jingwan's expression was indifferent. At this time, there was finally a change in her expression. That dagger, it's not because you have a change of heart, but because you don't have me in your eyes. How can you not have me in your eyes? Her voice gradually rose, and at this time, she was almost shouting. Don't talk about love sealing. Even if you have forgotten everything, you can't not have me in your eyes, you can't. Seeing the hysterical Jingwan, Li Hongyuan felt very distressed, but he also felt very happy. What should he do? He was selfish. He had never thought of only giving without receiving anything in return. He had been waiting for Jingwan to return the same feelings as him. Today he obviously got it. He wanted to hug her and kiss her. In fact, he did do so. However, the white cloth on his body was only half wrapped. Gong Jiu originally tried his best to ignore the sweet and bitter atmosphere between the two masters. He wanted to quickly deal with it and then quickly leave. In the end, he still did not achieve his goal. When the prince hugged the princess, he had to withdraw his hand. It was better to leave and wait for the princess's mood to stabilize. Anyway, although the heart was indeed hurt, it was not deep. It was only at the periphery and did not hurt the major blood vessels. It was okay to stop the bleeding and slow down. Gong Jiu went out and met the eyes of others. His body was a little stiff. He did not feel embarrassed just now, but now he was embarrassed. I'm going to prepare the medicine. He waved his sleeves and left quickly. He hugged Jingwan and kissed her fiercely. He wanted to completely possess her, but now he did not have the right time, place, and people, so he had to give up. Wan, it's my fault. I promise, there won't be a next time. Believe me, nothing is more important to me than you. Even if you are not in my eyes, you are all in my heart. I love you, I love you, I love you. Li Hongyuan held Jingwan in his arms, stroked her back, and whispered softly. Jingwan wept silently. In her entire life as Luo Jingwan, the amount of tears she had shed was not as much as the amount she shed for him, even when she was still a baby. Don't do such a ridiculous thing again. Next time, I will really kill you. If one knife doesn't work, I will chop you into pieces. There won't be a next time, there won't be a next time, there won't be a next time. Jingwan could vent her anger, and she also knew the root of the problem. Li Hongyuan breathed a sigh of relief. He was really afraid that she would be as dull as before. However, his wife had not changed at all. When she was ruthless, she was really ruthless. Jingwan left a deeper impression on others. Even Nanny Gong probably did not expect that Jingwan would do such a thing. The things involved were completely beyond the emotional problems between husband and wife. He was a prince, favored by the emperor. Even as his wife, not to mention almost killing him. even if she only had such an intention. It was a big crime that would bring disaster to the whole family, and even the whole family. However, Jingwan did so without any hesitation. She aimed at his heart, which meant that she was going to die. If it were other people, even if they hated him to the extreme and were in extreme pain, they would never do such a thing. They would not even have such an idea. Of course, ambitious women or women with ulterior motives were excluded. Their nature was different. However, when they killed someone, they would probably only use underhanded means behind their backs. They would not be like Jingwan, who did it openly in front of everyone. However, Wang Ye's reaction was not unexpected. However, once again he deeply realized that Wang Fei had a special place in Wang Ye's heart. Therefore, the most important master was still Wang Fei. In the future, he should take it easy. Wang Fei might look gentle, but when she was angry or ruthless, she would definitely kill people. The previous things seemed to have exhausted Jingwan's energy. At this moment, she leaned in Li Hongyuan's arms and fell asleep. Sure enough, no matter what happened, this man's arms were the safest harbor for her. This had formed unconsciously. Before falling in love with him, she was rational and absolutely independent in her thoughts. She did not rely on others, but became others' harbor invisibly. Li Hongyuan held Jingwan. He did not deliberately be careful, but he knew what kind of posture could make Jingwan sleep comfortably. However, when he was not facing Jingwan, now he was the real king of hell. Perhaps he was not as cold and terrifying as when he was locked in love, but his momentum was still breathtaking, making people breathless. After Gong Jiu confirmed that there was no goo in Jingwan's body, Li Hongyuan's heart returned to the original place. The thing he cared about most was solved. There was nothing else that could restrain him. Then, there was no need to suppress his anger for scheming against Jingwan. The ice covering the volcano that was about to erupt had been broken. No matter who it was, they would have to pay for what they had done. As for how many innocent people would be involved during this period, it was not within his scope of consideration. As this period of time, Gong Jiu came into contact with and understood more and more goo. His memory of goo also increased day by day. It just inexplicably appeared out of nowhere. Until now, he might have become a person who understood goo, at least in theory. However, the origin of these memories was still unknown. Perhaps there would be an answer in the future, or perhaps there would never be an answer. However, after more understanding, Gong Jiu noticed that there were traces of goo in his body. Now that the goo worm had disappeared, if he guessed correctly, it should be the forgetting goo. Forgetting only things related to goo. Perhaps it was because of the disappearance of the goo worm that he inexplicably gained more memories. He was interested in goo worms. As for how he knew these things, he did not care. It did not matter whether he knew it or not. When he became a shadow guard, everything in the past, whether it was love or hate, had become a past tense. Because the shadow guard was only a subordinate of the master and had no ego. Being interested in goo did not mean that he wanted to raise it. Know thyself and know thy enemy to win 100 battles. He just did not want to suffer from goo poison in the future. However, when he first used the goo to remove the emotion-locking goo, his prediction was wrong. However, by a freak combination of factors, he still achieved his final goal. If he encountered it again in the future, he should be more cautious. Naturally, Ruan Fengfei's body had already been discovered. It was later than expected, which showed how unpopular she was. However, her existence was special after all. It might be quiet in the thatched hut, but outside, it was already at daggers drawn. Li Hongyuan's order was only one word: kill. Jingwan had to take care of the fetus, and Li Hongyuan had to recuperate. They both needed a quiet and stable environment. Therefore, even if he knew what was happening outside, Li Hongyuan did not let it affect the hut. Whether it was Gong Jiu or Mama Gong, they were all doing their own things. It seemed that what happened outside had nothing to do with them. As for Jingwan, she slept for almost a day and a night. After Gong Jiu repeatedly confirmed that she was just sleeping, Li Hongyuan was finally relieved. During this period, he also took a few appropriate breaks, but each time was not considered long. Right now, he still needed to take charge of the overall situation. After Jingwan woke up, She did not expect to sleep for so long. However, her spirit came back, especially after Li Hongyuan personally fed her enough food. She was a bit like when she was raised in the prince's mansion. After recovering, there were some things that she could face. Yuan, where did your emotion-locking goo come from? Was it also silently planted by someone? Jingwan did not believe this possibility. Because of the substitute goo, Yuan Fengfei wanted to plant the emotion-locking goo in me while drawing a knife on herself. Therefore, Li Hongyuan did not hesitate to accept the substitute goo. Jingwan was speechless. Even if it was proven that he had been lied to, at that time, even if he was 99% sure that it was true, he would not have hesitated because he cared too much about it. So he would rather believe it than not. If it did not involve her, how could such a simple and crude method work on him? It's just a bug. I never thought it had the ability to reach the heavens. The fact is you did fall for it. Jingwan ridiculed. Well, she actually did not believe in the ability of the bug. Wan, don't hit people in the face, and don't expose people's shortcomings. Yuan Fengfei should have been under control, but in the end she escaped. Jingwan continued to expose the shortcomings of the bug mercilessly. Li Hongyuan was helpless. His wife was obviously still angry. I suspected it and had people investigate it, but they didn't find anything, so I didn't care. After all, we were not in the capital when Prince Zhong's mansion caught fire. I underestimated some people and caused negligence. It won't happen again in the future. Sure enough, they should eliminate the root of the problem from the beginning, but you can't generalize everything. Everything depends on the situation. Regarding Yuan Fengfei, she might have to bear a little responsibility. At that time, she thought that Yuan Fengfei had schemed against her and the Luo family, which made her angry. At one time, she felt that it was too easy to trample her to death. Someone had been secretly spying on her, so it was not surprising that he knew her thoughts. The things that happened later really made Yuan Fengfei suffer a fate worse than death. According to someone's style, he might have killed Yuan Fengfei from the beginning. So this pit, she dug it herself in the beginning? Jingwan expressed that she did not want to admit it. She had long forgotten about what happened 800 years ago. However, at this moment, Jingwan did not feel that Yuan Fengfei's death was too easy. Sure enough, she should be more decisive. This statement was quite strong, with an imposing manner that could not be refuted. His wife was prepared to not be merciful. Li Hongyuan could only be helpless. Who asked him to be in the wrong this time? He was weak. However, speaking of which, it was obvious that he was injured. No one comforted him, no one felt sorry for him. This was fine, but he still had to be humble. However, who asked this to be the most precious treasure in his hands? He could only pinch his nose and accept it. Digression. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/158184112. HTML chapter error. Click here to report. Registration is exempted. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book: www.bicken.com. Bicken.com mobile version reading website: Bicken.com. Chapter 573. What about Fu Rong and Sun Yilin? Have you dealt with them? Jingwan asked. Li Hongyuan glanced at Jingwan. His reaction was different from before. It was just mediocre. No, it's locked up. Locked up? I'm afraid it's not just locked up. Not dead. At least several layers of skin have been shed. There's something wrong with Sun Yilin, and there's something wrong with Fu Rong. Isn't it obvious? Yuan, you know what I mean. Don't try to get away with it. Jingwan looked at him faintly. So rational, so calm. Li Hongyuan felt that he was a little suspicious of Jingwan, who always followed him and indulged him. However, his wife was so attractive now. He wanted to rub her into his bones and blood. I'll leave them to you to deal with, okay? Li Hongyuan compromised, as if he was angry, and kissed Jingwan hard on the mouth. Jingwan didn't react on the surface, but her heart was completely soft. She knew how possessive this man was, And she also knew that he was not so calm now. However, because it was her, he was willing to control himself. He could put away all negative emotions. His real thoughts might be that he couldn't wait to tear those two people, especially Sun Yilin, into pieces. Jingwan reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck. She buried her face in his neck and didn't speak. At this time, silence was better than words. Li Hongyuan smiled silently, gentle but cruel. Jingwan walked out of the door and prepared to stretch her muscles and bones a little. Then she smelled something different in the air. Jingwan's sense of smell was much sharper than that of ordinary people. What's more, she was afraid that ordinary people could smell something different. When they entered this call yesterday, there were only a few of them. Now it seemed that only their own people were left. Although they had expected such a situation. Were those people dead? Jingwan frowned slightly. That was a real enemy. There would be no mercy. Killed them all? Yes. Li Hongyuan replied, but he didn't hide it. So when will we leave? We've been out for a long time. Grandmother and the others should be worried. Maybe we'll have to wait. They couldn't leave now even if they wanted to. Are there a lot of enemies outside? Jingwan guessed. This place is near a mountain range on the western border of Qiyuan. Further west is a small country. When the previous dynasty ruled this territory, the country of Zhang was still the territory of the previous dynasty. When the great ancestor rose up, in the flames of war, a local official took advantage of the situation and ceded the land to become the king, establishing the country of Zhang. When Qiyuan was just established, the country was not stable, and the mountain range on the side was a natural barrier. Zhang was easy to defend and difficult to attack, so Qiyuan allowed the existence of Zhang. Later, Zhang voluntarily submitted to Qiyuan and paid tribute, so for 100 years there was peace. But now things have changed. Li Hongyuan gave the answer in another way. Zhang betrayed Qiyuan and sided with the southern Qi kingdom? That's right. Although there's a mountain range on the side, a road was opened up in the early years. It's connected to Qiyuan and formed an official road. Every year, Zhang country pays tribute and uses this road. It's difficult for a large army to travel, but if it's only a few hundred people, it's not a problem at all. Our current position is only a few dozen li away from that official road. It was not a military fortress, so the number of people guarding it was quite limited. Moreover, it was the border between two countries. Naturally, there was a certain amount of trade. There were always a few people coming and going. Otherwise, they could change the route in advance. It was not difficult to cross the mountains with light luggage. Jingwan knew it. They couldn't have chosen such a place for no reason. Wan, there may be some obstacles later. It's probably not just weapons. Don't be afraid. We will definitely return to the capital safely. Jingwan chuckled. Why should I be afraid? Don't worry. Even if I'm a burden, I'll do it with a clear conscience. I'll stay where it's the safest. I won't run around, and I won't try to be brave. That's how it should be. Li Hongyuan kissed her. Moreover, you're not a burden. You're a treasure worth protecting with everything. She didn't know if it was worth it to protect her with everything he had, but she knew that he would do it. In addition, even if he didn't show it, she could feel it. It seemed that because of what happened before, someone seemed to be insecure. She could guarantee that even when she was asleep, he didn't leave her side for half a step. When he was asleep, he hugged her, and when he was awake, he looked at her. In this relationship, he was actually the passive one. As strong as he was, there were times when he was worried about gains and losses. Jingwan touched the corner of his lips. Yuan, you can do whatever you want. Really, you don't have to endure so hard. In the past, she had told him that if it wasn't necessary, he should try his best not to kill. But now, she didn't want to say this anymore. He should live freely and do whatever he wanted. There was no need to wrong himself. They had come to this point today. What else could they not accept from each other? No matter what kind of person he was, even if he was really sick or really perverted, she would accept it all. No matter what kind of karma he had, she would accompany him. When Li Hongyuan heard this, a fierce light flashed in his eyes. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. It was really undisguised wickedness. He held Jingwan's hand and kissed her fingertips. He didn't say anything, but it was enough to show his happy mood. As for what to do next, it was another story. When Jingwan saw this, a thought suddenly flashed through her mind. Someone is going to be unlucky. However, the thought only flashed through her mind, leaving no trace behind. No matter who that unlucky person was, whether they were dead or alive, they could no longer arouse her emotions. Jingwan still lived her life. Gong Jiu had prescribed her miscarriage prevention medicine. Although the conditions were limited now, this was after all a backer. Even if there was no ready-made medicine, she could still think of a way. Every time before and after the medicine, she would take her pulse. Other people took her pulse once every 3 days. Now she took her pulse 3 times a day, far more than that. Li Hongyuan also changed his medicine frequently. This kind of medicine was ready-made. When they left White Dragon Temple, after all, the road ahead was very dangerous. The most probably was the medicine. In addition, Gong Jiu also gave him acupuncture to accelerate the healing of the wound. In the current situation, a healthy body was far better than an injured body. After all, his martial strength was there. If he couldn't move because of his injury, he would waste more than just a portion of his combat strength. However, he was injured. It was not something that could be healed in a day. Did Jingwan regret her stab? She still didn't. She would feel heartache, she would worry, but she did not regret it. Li Hongyuan did not hide the situation outside from her. When the people below reported to him, she listened at the side. The situation was more serious than expected. Thinking about it, since Prince Jin of Qi Yuan knew that Zhang Guo was colluding with Southern Qi, then for his own safety, it was imperative to get rid of Li Hongyuan. After all, no matter what ambitions or plans Southern Qi had for Qi Yuan, before they succeeded, it was all empty talk. And no matter how bad Qi Yuan was, if they were determined to deal with the traitor Zhang Guo would not have the slightest ability to resist. Therefore, before Southern Qi realized its annexation of Qi Yuan, at least the large territory bordering Zhang Guo and Southern Qi would become Southern Qi's possession. Zhang Guo would not publicly acknowledge Southern Qi as a vassal. Meeting behind the scenes was one thing, but betraying on the surface was another. Dealing with Li Hongyuan had originally been Southern Qi's plan. The saint of the barbarians, Ruan Fengfei, was the main executor. In the middle of this, there were many people who cooperated with her. In short, because they knew that Prince Jin of Qi Yuan was not a small matter, controlling such a person was far more valuable than directly killing him. The chances of success were very high. Some people in Southern Qi, because they understood the emotion-sealing curse, believed that after planting it in Li Hongyuan, they already had the overall situation under control. When the people of Zhangguo acted, it was only to add a layer of protection. They did not think that it would be used at all, so they were so thoroughly exposed to Li Hongyuan. And the result was that Ruan Fengfei died. It must be said that the curse in Ruan Fengfei's body was not just 1 or 2 types. When she died, some people in Southern Qi, thousands of li away, already knew. The people of Zhangguo hidden in the mountains also knew. There was nothing much to say. Since they couldn't use someone with great ability, they could only be completely eradicated. If 1 person could not kill him, then 10. If 10 could not kill him, then 100. In short, they could not let him leave alive. Jingwan looked in the direction of the exit of the colonel. Although it was not the only way out of here, if they retreated into the mountains, it would probably be even more disadvantageous. She herself was the biggest problem. She lowered her head and looked at her belly. Indeed, in the beginning, it was correct to wait for everything to settle down before having a child. However, this child did indeed have a special meaning. Jingwan was full of expectations for it, in various ways. The people outside were certain that they would not enter the mountains, so they did not attack with all their strength at the beginning. It was nothing more than relying on their numbers, and wanting to fight a battle of attrition. However, they did not know that Li Hongyuan had brought out shadow guards. Shadow guards were the least afraid of a battle of attrition. They had undergone endurance, hunger, and other training. When the other side could no longer increase their numbers, in the end, it was not clear who would win and who would lose. However, when the other side discovered this, the peace on the surface would soon be broken. It had been almost 18 hours since Ruan Fengfei's death. The other side should have almost figured out some things. Even if they wanted to continue to delay, the other side would not wait any longer. As the saying goes, a long night means trouble. Even if they were at the border, after all, it was the territory of Qi Yuan. More than 10 miles away, there was a garrison of Qi Yuan. Even if there were fewer people, they were more than the people from Zhang State. Once they were alarmed, the roles of the hunter and the prey would be reversed. This night, it was estimated that there would be a hard battle. The sky had already darkened. The light in the room was only a small one, which could illuminate an inch of the room. Jingwan leaned on Li Hongyuan and did not say anything. At this time, there was no need to say anything. Gong Jiu took Jingwan's pulse again. Actually, Jingwan felt that it was unnecessary. How many times had he done it today? Nothing happened to her. What problem could there be? However, her husband insisted, and Gong Jiu was never careless when he took her pulse. Even if he had to do it once every 2 hours, he wouldn't do it half-heartedly. Forget it, it was just taking her pulse. However, this time, Gong Jiu's pulse reading time seemed to be unusually long. Jingwan's mind wandered for a while, but it was still not over. Her heart couldn't help but thump. Could it be that something went wrong? Li Hongyuan's brows also wrinkled. When Gong Jiu stopped, he asked, "What's wrong?" Replying to Wang Ye, Wang Fei's body is no different from before. However, after checking her pulse today, this subordinate realized a problem. Wang Fei was poisoned by a sleeping goo. This is a fact that can be confirmed. Sun Yilin asked Fu Rong to remove the sleeping goo and took Wang Fei away from White Dragon Temple. Normally, no matter what kind of goo worm it was, whether it was removed from the body or died in the host's body and disappeared, the traces of the goo worm in the host's body should be maintained for about 3 months. However, from Wang Fei's condition, there is no trace of the goo worm in her body. Jingwan sat up a little straighter, and Li Hongyuan's face also showed a bit of seriousness. Go and bring Fu Rong here. Originally, Jingwan was going to deal with Fu Rong and Sun Yilin after returning to the capital. As for what to do, she would think about it at that time. But now, it seemed that Fu Rong had other uses. If she wanted to harm Jingwan, her performance at the beginning was wrong. When Jingwan saw Fu Rong, she was a little surprised. No matter what, she was much better than expected. It seemed that her face was a little worse, and it didn't look like she was tortured. This servant greets Wang Ye and Wang Fei. She still regarded herself as Jingwan's maid and didn't forget her duty. Fu Rong, what method did you use to remove the sleeping goo for me? Moreover, I was indeed poisoned by a substitute goo before, right? Looking at Fu Rong, she lowered her eyebrows and narrowed her eyes. Fu Rong, are you really not going to say anything? Fu Rong was silent for a moment. Then she slightly raised her head and looked at Jingwan. This had already crossed the line. After learning the rules, it was the first time she made such a mistake. Fu Rong concisely said her own background and concealed all the bitterness. It was the Minister of Rights, Su Daran, who protected this servant's chastity when he was the governor. He is not a person of the Qi Yuan, but a person of the former way, and his status is not low. They clearly gave this servant a miserable fate, but they still want this servant to work for them. Based on what? Even if this servant's background is low, this servant still has a human life. Some things naturally have to be returned. Good. Jingwan also understood the meaning of Fu Rong. That was, those people dominated her fate. She was angry and unreconciled and wanted to retaliate. However, she was just a weak woman, and she didn't have that ability. So she borrowed force, and the target of this force was of course Jin Qinhuang. Therefore, she meekly accepted the task given to her by those people and put a goo on Jingwan. In essence, it was not to hurt Jingwan, but to anger Li Hongyuan. She believed that Li Hongyuan would eventually find out about the former way. At that time, the former way would more or less pay the price. The price paid by a country, no matter how small, was far more than her own hatred. Although she still couldn't find the real culprit, at least she could be a little comforted. Not to mention Jingwan, even when Li Hongyuan looked at Fu Rong, there was a slight change in his eyes. He really didn't see that Fu Rong had such a temperament. The firmness in her heart had never been smoothed out. Even if she accepted her fate, she didn't accept it. She looked docile and harmless, but once the bottom line of her tolerance was exceeded, then she would secretly show her claws and use her intelligence to plot little by little. In fact, until now Fu Rong wanted to borrow Li Hongyuan's power to deal with the former Wei. Although, even if she didn't do anything, Li Hongyuan still wouldn't let the former Wei go. However, whether she did or not, the nature was different. What's more, she accurately and ruthlessly stepped on Li Hongyuan's weak spot. Li Hongyuan chuckled. Women like Fu Rong existed in large numbers. He never put them in his eyes, but now he was ruthlessly used. This experience was quite fresh. Jingwan glanced at him. She could feel the danger in his eyes. No matter how he acted in front of her, he had absolute pride. In his eyes, Fu Rong was like an ant. It would be strange if he was happy to be played by an ant. But now this was not the main point. Fu Rong, what's the matter with the sleeping insect and the substitute insect? In response to Wang Fei, this matter begins with the true identity of this servant's mother. They all believe that this servant's mother is an ordinary woman. This is true, but not completely true. This servant's mother is actually from Nanqi, a barbarian tribe. Speaking of this, Jingwan didn't know what expression to show. When I was young, father wasn't around all year round. Mother was with me almost every day. At that time, she told me a lot of things over and over again. Perhaps I didn't understand, but it would be hard for me to not remember after hearing it over and over again. As for her past, she didn't say much. I vaguely remember that she was the daughter of the leader of the barbarian tribe. In addition, she was very talented in raising insects. She was secretly chosen to be the saintess. However, I don't know what happened later. She left her home, and was in the situation of the former Wei, where her life and death were controlled. She didn't raise any more insects. I don't know if it was because she couldn't raise any more, or if there was some other reason. She didn't raise any more insects until her death. As for the insects of the barbarian tribe, she told me everything. However, she only told me the signs of being infected, and the method to cure it. As for how to raise the insects, she didn't say a word. When she was dying, she gave me a bead. A bead that can cure hundreds of poisons and eliminate hundreds of insects. It is said that it is a sacred object that has been passed down for thousands of years in the barbarian tribe. Because of it, the sleeping insect and the substitute insect in your body were eliminated. It was also because of it that I was able to get the medicine from the Gong family's hospital when I was in the mansion. Hand over the bead, and I can spare your life. Fu Rong was silent. She lowered her eyes and glanced at the Buddha bead on Jingwan's wrist. Li Hongyuan sneered. You don't want to hand it over? When you die, I can always find it and take it away. Wait. Jingwan held Li Hongyuan's hand. She remembered that Fu Rong had said something profound to her before. Now she thought about it. Fu Rong, is that bead with me? Since you cured me of the insect, you haven't taken it back, right? I can't repay your kindness. It's useless for a person like me to take it. Fu Rong admitted in a disguised way. But where did you put it? I don't even have a purse on me now. It's been so long. It's impossible for her not to notice that there is one more thing on her body. Because of doubts, she slightly lowered her head. Then her eyes suddenly fixed on the Buddha bead. This is the only bead on her body. The question is it possible? Jingwan reached out her hand and fiddled with the beads one by one. That bead is quite strange. It can change its appearance within a certain range. As long as the size is about the same, it will change into the appearance of the nearest bead. Did that mean that there was an alien in her Buddhist prayer beads from the beginning? Jingwan's expression was a bit stiff. This is, the insect can go against the heaven, and the bead has become a spirit? The effect of the insect can barely be regarded as something in the insect's body that targets human nerves, hormones or other things. But this bead, is it possible that there is something in the body of the chameleon in it? But the chameleon is alive. Even if the existence of the chameleon itself is unscientific, Jingwan still needs some time to accept it when she encounters something unscientific. Li Hongyuan held Jingwan's wrist. His acceptance was much higher than Jingwan's. Such a good thing, he will try his best to get it for Jingwan. Now that it is with Jingwan, he will not be polite. However, it is for Jingwan to use, so naturally, It must be absolutely safe. Therefore, Li Hongyuan directly took off the Buddha bead and handed it to Gong Jiu. Without Li Hongyuan's explanation, Gong Jiu also knew his intention. There are many poisons in Gong Jiu's body. And in the house where Wan Fengfei lived before, there are many poisonous insects. It is very easy to verify its function. As for its safety, in fact, during this period, Jingwan has been carrying it with her all the time. There is no abnormality in her body, which is already very good proof. If it is harmful, even if it is very small, after such a long time, there will be more or less signs. And if it takes a few years for the harm to appear, then even Li Hongyuan will probably not wait so long. No matter how suspicious he is, he will not go to this extent. If she doesn't wear it, it may lead to the treasure being covered in dust. The result of the verification was quite obvious. When those poisonous insects touched the Buddha bead, they turned into smoke in an instant and disappeared without a trace. And when the rabbit carried the Buddha bead, Gong Jiu sprinkled all kinds of poisons on it, or directly poured it down its mouth. It was more than enough to poison hundreds of people to death, but the rabbit was still alive and kicking. Hearing it was naturally not as shocking as seeing it. This bead is really a good thing. Do you know the range of effect of this bead? Li Hongyuan asked Fu Rong. Wangya, forgive me, this slave doesn't know. She had obtained something from her mother, but she had never had the chance to verify it. Perhaps she had, such as poison or something. After all, she had probably gotten in the way of the other sisters. However, she had been unknowingly dealt with, so she naturally had no way of knowing. Wangya, this subordinate knows something at this moment. Gong Jiu said. Li Hongyuan was already used to the memories that popped up from time to time in the past few days. The sacred object of the barbarian tribe does have such a function. For the poisonous insects, direct contact is what you saw just now. If you don't touch it, it will take some time, at most 3 days. Wearing the sacred object, it is basically impossible for the poisonous insects to get close to the body. If there is an accident, it will not affect the host. Like any poison, the maximum range of effect is 10 feet. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/158200939. HTML chapter error. Click here to report. Registration is free. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book, www.bicken.com. Bikugo mobile reading website, and bicken.com. Chapter 574. No matter why the barbarians worshipped their most precious treasure as a sacred object, it had nothing to do with Jingwan. Li Hongyuan also understood some problems, so he put the beads back on Jingwan's wrist without hesitation. Li Hongyuan could take all the good things in the world for himself, but Jingwan couldn't. Although she didn't deny that she wanted this thing very much. If she had it from the beginning, then there wouldn't be a series of things later. However, there was a contradiction in itself. If Fu Rong gave it to Jingwan early, Fu Rong wouldn't have the capital to take revenge. The premise of Fu Rong's betrayal was that she could ensure Jingwan's safety. After achieving her goal, she did not hesitate to give the treasure to Jingwan. She might have thought about it in the past, but at that time, Jingwan was protected by Li Hongyuan so tightly that not even a drop of water could leak out. The barbarian tribe's holy relic seemed to be just icing on the cake. Now that Fu Rong had given the treasure to Jingwan for no reason, she, who was already not very trustworthy, was afraid that it would only lead to more suspicion. Therefore, even if she wanted to give the treasure, she needed to look at the right time. As for Li Hongyuan, to be honest, his weight in Fu Rong's heart was really low. His identity as a prince may not be comparable to the identity of Jingwan's husband. What Fu Rong praised most about him was his deep love for Jingwan. Because he didn't have any weight, Fu Rong didn't hesitate to use him. Jingwan fiddled with the beads, but she didn't take them off in the end. First, her husband would definitely not allow it. Second, she wanted it anyway, so there was no need to pretend. The problem now was how to deal with Fu Rong. She took her things, and she didn't betray her. According to reason, the previous things should be written off. However, She was indeed poisoned by the sleeping insect, and then her husband was taken out of the capital and fell into a series of dangerous situations. Fu Rong's actions were the cause of everything. In the big picture, it was not excessive to punish her. It was not something that could be offset by a bead. She wanted to punish her a little, but her husband wouldn't let her go easily after knowing that he was tricked. Some people's dignity was often more unforgivable than a true betrayal or a true crime. Seeing that you are sensible, I can spare you from death, but you can't escape punishment. Yuan, let Fu Rong make up for her mistakes. You said to let me deal with it. Jingwan said. Li Hongyuan glanced at Jingwan. Jingwan's eyes were very firm. Obviously, she already had a plan in her heart. Li Hongyuan snorted softly, which meant that he acquiesced. Fu Rong, the person who contacted you in the White Dragon Temple was Sun Yilan, and the people who traveled with you along the way. Except for the few of them, the others were probably all dead. We want to let them believe that you are still not exposed, and then we will send some news to them. What do you think? However, there is a lot of danger in this matter, so you can refuse. There was not only one way to atone for her mistakes. Fu Rong was very smart. Fu Rong was a very smart person. Not only was she a fast learner, in fact, if she was given enough conditions, she would not be worse than several women in the palace. Moreover, she had advantages in some aspects. For example, after living in a brothel for many years, it was easy for her to please someone, especially men. For example, she had a lot of ups and downs in her life, so she did not care much about her life. Moreover, even though she had experienced so much, her heart was not corrupted. She still had humanity and knew how to be grateful. For the current Minister of Rights, Su Darren, who was a black-hearted person, in fact, he would not like people like him, because he knew best that people like him would do anything to achieve their goals. There were some things that they could do themselves, but the people below them absolutely could not do that. Therefore, if all kinds of advantages were used properly, they might play an unexpected role. Fu Rong listened quietly, and her eyes flashed slightly. Wang Fei, this servant is willing. If possible, this servant also wants to take revenge on her own. She put a gu in Jingwan and used Li Hongyuan. Her purpose was not simple. Because of the unwillingness and resentment in her heart, she used the strength of others to achieve her goal. How could it be better than doing it herself and participating in it personally? It had to be said that Fu Rong was really unexpected again and again. The things hidden in her bones were too different on the surface. However, in the end, the culprit who made her what she was today was the royal family of the former Wei. Using a weak woman's body to compete with them was undoubtedly like an ant trying to shake a tree. Fu Rong, have you thought about it? This is not a joking matter. Your Highness, I originally thought that everything that happened in the past was due to my bad luck, but since I was able to meet Your Highness, it meant that I wasn't completely bad. If I could serve Your Highness for the rest of my life, it would be an excellent thing. However, someone came out and told me that everything was man-made, and wanted me to serve Your Highness for the rest of my life. It's just that my bones haven't completely softened yet, so I have to repay you for the rest of my life. It would be good if I could repay you with 20 or 30%. It would be even better if I could repay you with 50 or 60%. How could this be called bones are not completely soft? She was made of iron. Her appearance looked soft and easy to pinch, but if you really took a bite, you might break a mouthful of teeth. Such a talent, if she was placed by her side as a servant, it would definitely be wasted. However, thinking about the spies sent by other countries to Qi Yuan, the top spies were all women, but they could not be clean and innocent. Whether they were really dissolute or forced, in short, they did not have a good ending in the end. Jingwan did not want Fu Rong to go to this step. Moreover, she did not have any training. Wan, don't worry. I also have people in the former Wei. When the time comes, I will send people to help her. Of course, the so-called help is also surveillance. In Li Hongyuan's eyes, there is a stain on her that cannot be easily washed away. Besides, there is still a lot of things waiting for us to deal with in the Qi Yuan. It will take a lot of time to arrange for her to go to the former Wei. During this time, she can learn some things, but she does not need to learn too much. Specially trained spies and ordinary spies have their own uses. The former may not be better than the latter. Many times, it depends on how they are used. Li Hongyuan looked at Fu Rong's face. When imperial consort Su wanted her to be Li Hongyuan's concubine, she resolutely disfigured her face. Anyway, it is already disfigured. She will be infected with a goo and become even uglier. At that time, probably no man will want to covet her. Li Hongyuan did not even need to guess. He knew that his wife was most worried about the last thing. Jingwan was silent. If there was a so-called beauty goo, there would naturally be an ugly goo. Speaking of which, the former was made up of young and beautiful women, but the latter was far less exaggerated. Jingwan suspected that Sun Yilin had a similar goo. It seemed that it was not as simple as making people ugly. Moreover, no matter what kind of goo it was, Jingwan was against it from the bottom of her heart. However, when some things were not used on one's own people, one had to admit that they were actually very useful and effective. Compared with her disgust as expected, her husband could get things done more easily. That was why she had the upper hand. People were indeed selfish. Even if they were selfless, it was only relative. The only person who was truly selfless at any time and in any position was probably the sage. As for where those goo came from, if they knew where they came from, would they be afraid of not being able to get them? Moreover, Gongjiu's current state was quite strange. Perhaps at some time, all the methods of raising goo would appear in his mind, regardless of whether he wanted to raise them or not. As long as Li Hongyuan said a word, he would definitely do his best. Let's see how Fu Rong chooses, Jingwan said. She even specially looked at a certain someone. Was there a need to speak so harshly? For most women, chastity was important, but appearance was also important. It may be easier to rely on beauty to gain a foothold, but at the same time, it is also fragile. From other aspects, things may be more difficult, but once you succeed, your foothold will be more stable. Moreover, people in high positions never lack female confidants. It may be easier to not be a female confidant, but it may be easier to be a counselor behind a female confidant than to approach the master directly. There are many things that you don't need to inquire about personally. In this way, your own danger will also be reduced. At this moment, perhaps Jingwan needed to admit a fact. Those who treated Fu Rong as a chess piece actually unlocked some of her dangerous attributes. And whoever unlocked it would experience it. Jingwan was a little bit looking forward to the storm that Fu Rong would stir up in the future. You can leave. It won't be peaceful tonight. Eat something and refresh yourself. Since she didn't expose herself in front of her, she should treat her like Hei Mei. As the saying goes, prepare for a rainy day. Even if Fu Rong was a chess piece that couldn't be used for a while, she should pay attention to the details now and try to make it as seamless as possible. Yes, I will leave now. Fu Rong squatted and took 2 steps back. She seemed to have thought of something. Princess, I exchanged one of your prayer beads. Master Liaochen should know. The implication was that Fu Rong could rest assured. Otherwise, she could go back and ask Master Liaochen for confirmation. Jingwan didn't suspect anything. She wasn't that suspicious. She just glanced at a certain someone who was still calm. Gong Mama had been waiting at the door. When she knew that Fu Rong betrayed her, she was angry, but she was used to being cautious and stable, so she didn't show her emotions easily. At this point, her view of Fu Rong became a little complicated. It was the same as Jingwan's previous thought. It was a pity that Fu Rong was a maid. It was a good choice to send her to the former way. However, Gong Mama valued Jingwan very much. No matter what Fu Rong did, in Gong Mama's heart, she would never be able to clear her name. Of course, it was different from Li Hongyuan. Li Hongyuan looked at whether Fu Rong was trustworthy. She looked at the possibility that Fu Rong could continue to serve Jingwan. Fu Rong never denied what she did. She didn't feel guilty. So no matter who she faced, she was frank. After Fu Rong walked away, Gongjiu, if Fu Rong has any injuries, take some medicine and let Hei Mei help her apply it. Also, try to reduce the burden on Sun Yilin, Jingwan said. Anyway, she didn't believe that these 2 people were really intact. Yes, Gongjiu responded. He didn't even look at Li Hongyuan's expression. With the princess, the prince could only be the second. In order to recover her energy, Jingwon also went to bed early. Even if she knew that the second half of the night might be very dangerous, because Lee Hongyuan was there, she didn't worry. Therefore, it was easy for her to fall asleep. After falling asleep, she slept very soundly. When Jingwon was woken up, Gong Mama, Hei Mei, and Fu Rong were all waiting on her side. All the things she needed to wash up were prepared. When she was completely dressed, Jingwon was completely awake. At this moment, her clothes were very simple and neutral. There were no ornaments on her head or body. The only ornament was probably the Buddha beads on her wrist. However, in the end, Jingwon still asked Gong Mama to tie the dagger to her arm. Although the sleeves were much narrower, it was still easy to roll up the sleeves. With me here, what does Wanwan need it for? Lee Hongyuan was a little dissatisfied. He was injured, so he wouldn't use force easily. Moreover, he didn't feel at ease leaving Jingwon to others. Therefore, his most important task in the future was to protect his wife. I believe in you. This is just in case. Jingwon was worried about him. Sometimes, even if she knew that her ability was limited and she might even be more of a hindrance, she still wanted to protect her lover. Of course, Jingwon had learned self-defense in her previous life. When she went to the northwest, she learned it from Gong Mama. Because she had a good foundation, she was not as good as a well-trained person. Therefore, she definitely wouldn't be a hindrance. Lee Hongyuan frowned, but he didn't say anything in the end. When everything was ready, Jingwon stood up and moved a little. When she lowered her head, she silently found that her belly seemed to be a lot bigger. She didn't know if it was because the clothes were more close-fitting, or because she didn't pay attention to her belly for a period of time. After careful calculation, it had been more than 5 months since she was pregnant on June 11th. She would be born in more than 4 months. Jingwon slowly exhaled, looked back at Lee Hongyuan, and said with a smile, "Let's go." Lee Hongyuan touched her face and leaned over to kiss her lips. Anyway, these 2 days, he kissed Jingwon without any scruples. Jingwon was used to it, and the people around her were also used to it. When they saw it, they just tilted their heads. Even the most innocent black girl didn't blush. There were not many torches outside, but they weren't few either. Basically, they were controlled to the extent that the enemy couldn't see clearly, and it wouldn't affect their progress. Jingwon saw Sun Yilin at a glance. Compared with the other people who were almost integrated into one, he was a little unique. He seemed to be in poor spirits, much worse than Fu Rong. It was enough to show that someone really took special care of him. However, compared with the way here, the treacherous aura on Sun Yilin's body was much weaker. Even if his face was still ugly, she didn't feel uncomfortable. Sun Yilin's abnormality could only be explored later. Although it was unforgivable, for the sake of Sun Yijia, Jingwon was still willing to find reasons and excuses for him. Sun Yilin's current position was hostile to Jingwon, so there was still a person who was watching him. However, this person couldn't be expected to do much. If necessary, he might directly kill Sun Yilin. After all, he was an enemy. If he couldn't take him away, he would kill him. Was it possible to let him go back? What a simple logic. Lee Hongyuan was protecting Jingwon, and there were a few other people around them. There weren't many people, and it was similar to the formation on the side. If they were too tightly protected, it would only make them more conspicuous. At that time, they would become targets. In addition, Blackie and Fu Rong were walking together, and there were also people around them. In a sense, they were also Jingwon's substitutes. Jingwon was walking silently and attentively. The noise outside the valley gradually entered her ears. In fact, there were a lot of people, but it was still much weaker than the shouting on the battlefield. At some point, her footsteps quickened, and she was about to jog. And it seemed that because of the appearance of these people, the noise suddenly doubled, and she could even feel the pressure of the crowd suddenly surging up. When she was in the northwest, Jingwon was the closest, and she was also at the rear of the battlefield, so she didn't see the scene with her own eyes. Perhaps it wasn't as grand as that time, but the difference wasn't too far. Especially when she was close, she could hear the sound of a sharp blade piercing flesh and blood. And there was also an unusually obvious smell of blood, which made her faintly nauseous. Jingwon wasn't sure if she could bear it, so she kept her head down and followed Li Hongyuan closely. In fact, as a special personnel who needed to be protected, looking around was a big taboo. Jingwan wouldn't make such a low-level mistake. Li Hongyuan didn't stop walking, and his direction was very clear. And from the beginning to the end, Jingwan didn't hear any voices nearby. Obviously, he and his subordinates had a way of communicating without words. Zhang Guo was determined to take Li Hongyuan's life, and all directions outside the call must have been blocked. However, because of the terrain and the arrangement of the other party's personnel, there were always relatively weak points. Li Hongyuan's subordinates must have figured these out clearly. Without communication, how could they be unwavering? Jingwan felt the stickiness under her feet. In the absence of rain and snow, it was obvious that it was soaked in blood. The light of the torch was limited. At some point, Jingwan stepped down and stepped on a soft but hard object, and she stumbled slightly. Jingwan's first reaction was that it was an arm. She had clearly killed someone before, and whether it was physical or psychological, she didn't have any reaction, but now sure enough, whether it was killing someone or dying someone, she had to choose her target. Li Hongyuan hurriedly supported Jingwan. "Wan, I'm fine." She suppressed the discomfort in her heart. Li Hongyuan frowned in the darkness, but without another word, he carried Jingwan in his arms. Caught off guard, Jingwan's body leaned back a little, but her mouth was tightly shut. She wrapped her arms around his neck to prevent the nearest enemy from hearing. She lowered her voice and said, "Yuan, put me down. This is too eye-catching." It might not be easy to see clearly if they were walking by themselves with the torch swaying, but if they were carrying someone, as long as the torch swayed slightly and someone saw them and shouted, they would be exposed. Wan, don't worry. Your husband will definitely bring you back safely." Li Hongyuan subconsciously kissed the corner of her eye again. In this wilderness, the road was rugged and uneven. For the average person, even in the daytime, it wouldn't be smooth to walk, let alone when they couldn't see clearly. If she followed them, it would indeed slow down the speed. Jingwan pursed her lips, hugged her hands tighter, and no longer spoke. In this way, she didn't have to concentrate on walking. She could see the situation nearby. The weapons on the periphery were clashing, and the middle was ready to strike at any time. Upon closer inspection, she found that they seemed to be blocking her figure, and the torch could only illuminate a small area. In this way, her worries seemed to be superfluous. Compared to the people of Zhang, who were shouting to kill, the people surrounding the husband and wife were very quiet. "Jin Qin Wang Fei is over here." It was unknown who shouted, but this direction was obviously a bit different from Jingwan's direction. The enemies in front were reduced by half in an instant. The pressure suddenly decreased, and the speed of the breakthrough was obviously faster, because Jin Qinhuang didn't want his Wang Fei to be hurt. Even if it was only a possibility, he would rather be controlled by others. This showed how important his Wang Fei was to him. In this case, even if the two separated and Jin Qinhuang Fei was in danger, it was impossible for Jin Qinhuang to be indifferent. And Zhangguo's plan was to keep an eye on the husband and wife while they were breaking out. It would be best if they could directly find Li Hongyuan. It should be known that before this, the people of Zhang who were responsible for intercepting and killing Li Hongyuan had set a high reward. They took Li Hongyuan's head, high official, generous salary, and beautiful women. Not a single thing would be lacking. For ordinary soldiers, this was a temptation. Just by killing one person, they could reach the sky in a single bound. Compared to struggling in other places for a lifetime, and still being at the bottom, there was basically no need to think about what to choose. Therefore, the attraction of this sentence was absolutely strong. The people who were attracted didn't even hesitate. Jingwan's heart couldn't help but rise. She turned her head to look in the direction of the voice. Under the dim light of the fire, she could only see the crowd moving. More and more people were rushing over, and they were still fighting. It was enough to see that there were people of Zhang, and also people of her own side. This time, the one who used her identity to lead the enemies away was either Fu Rong or He Mei, and the two were together. The two might have the intention to be her substitute, but there was no deliberate arrangement. Jingwan didn't know if they were accidentally discovered or deliberately. Her fists clenched tighter and tighter. If she could, she didn't want anything to happen to them. If she could, she hoped that all of them would be fine. But in this kind of situation, how could they not be injured or dead? Jingwan gritted her teeth. Her breathing became a little heavy, but she still didn't speak. She knew very well that only when the couple went out, they had a higher chance of surviving. If they were left behind, it meant that everyone would die here. Everyone around her was fighting for her, giving their all for her, and even dying for her. That kind of feeling was definitely not a good feeling. As long as one was not absolutely selfish and ruthless, it would be impossible for them to remain indifferent, let alone Jingwan. That kind of impact was definitely unprecedented. Li Hongyuan could understand Jingwan's current feelings. After all, he had tasted that kind of feeling in his previous life. Later, his heart became colder and colder. Although it wasn't completely indifferent, it was no longer enough to move him, let alone make him do something irrational. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/15852889. HTML. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book, www.bicken.com. Bikuga mobile reading website and bicken.com. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.